and then I click this. Wow. Hold on. Wow. Look at that. It's fancy. Wow. Okay. Uh, music folder. What were we listening to? RuneScape music. The perfect backdrop to explaining Warhammer. Anyway. Anyway, yes. The perfect backdrop. Good morning. Hello. On this fine morning. We are going to go through... Oh, wait. I need my outfit. Hello. We are going to go through... I can move my arm. We are going to go through this PowerPoint, and I will teach you the ways of the 41st millennium. The year 40,000. You know, I'm just noticing, I'm looking at this picture. Yeah, Ultramarines and all that, but the orc, it's got an evil sun's tattoo. Now, yeah, that makes sense. He's obviously an evil sun, right? But, like, if the orc has an evil sun's tattoo, who tattooed an orc? How was the orc willing to sit for the tattoo? Is it really a tattoo? Or is it just like, can you tattoo orc skin? Is orc skin tattooable? I mean, they're like a mushroom people. Like, these are the questions, you know? I wonder about the tattoo. It's cool, visually very cool, but what are the mechanics of whoops. What are the mechanics of having a tattoo done as an orc? You know? Like, why? What? Who did it? Was it a... Like, who did it? Is it possible? These are the questions I have rolling around in my brain. Anyway, we're just gonna go. I've been stalling for too long. So the first question you might have is, what even is Warhammer? Explain to me, because I've heard that it's like a miniature game. I've heard that it's like it's a video game. I've heard that there's books, and that's a good question, and there are a lot of answers. So the answer is yes. So Warhammer itself is quite varied. Whoops. Back up. What are you doing? It's quite varied. Basically, it's essentially a universe, because there's a whole bunch of different ways in which you can interact with the universe. I turned down my fucking RuneScape music a little bit. It's a little overpowering. There's a couple different ways in which you can interact with the universe, and that's what's kind of the fun of it. Is it's sort of like the Marvel MCU kind of thing, except it's not Marvel and it's not superheroes, but it has that kind of vibe where there's a bunch of different things all sort of interlinked. Like, there's Marvel comics, there's Marvel video games, there's some Marvel board games or whatever. It's sort of the same thing, but for Warhammer, or Star Wars is probably a better example. How there's like TV shows and movies and comics and video games, and like Warhammer and Star Wars are very similar in terms of like how their structure works, with a bunch of different characters and a bunch of different things. And that's kind of the whole thing. So there is, of course, the game, which is where Warhammer comes from. It is like the tabletop war game, basically, is where it comes from. It's the one you can see up here at the top, where there's a bunch of little like soldiers. Interesting. There's a bunch of little like soldier guys, and you put them on a tabletop. You paint the little figures, you put them together, and you have them fight. And that is where Warhammer gets its start. It gets its start in originally Warhammer Fantasy, which is basically the same thing but set in a fantasy universe. You've seen Warhammer Fantasy if you've ever played like Vermintide or something. That's the original Warhammer. Warhammer Fantasy then evolves into, or they make a second spin-off game called Warhammer 40k, and it is basically essentially they took all the tropes they had in Warhammer Fantasy and turned them into future stuff. So, you had the humans, and they show up in Warhammer Fantasy. Warhammer 40k. You have like demons and stuff, which are still in Warhammer 40k. You have elves, the Eldar. You have, and so on and so forth. Basically, anytime there's a fantasy trope in Warhammer Fantasy, it shows up in 40k. And when we go through the individual races, I'll explain what their fantasy trope was first, and then how they got to where they were as the sci-fi version, or I guess really science fantasy version. So, yeah. So the base of it is that they started with a war game. I believe the actual original war game was actually called Rogue Trader, and then eventually they released the first like 40k box set stuff, and then this is like the 80s, and then they started making more Warhammer 40k models, and then 40k sort of took over as the popular one over fantasy. So eventually they had to like reboot fantasy, and it's a whole thing. We're not going to talk about any of the Warhammer fantasy stuff, or the reboot. That's an entirely different PowerPoint. Sigmar's cool, and I highly recommend it to anyone, but I wanted to go with 40k because it is, when most people say Warhammer, 40k is what they mean. So I wanted to go with that instead. Anyway, so with the tabletop miniature stuff, you have all kinds of things you can do with that. You can paint them. There's people who just collect and paint. There's people who like build them and play with them. There's people who just they barely paint them at all, and they just play with them. Like, they just do the tactical part of the game. Yeah, it's a very interesting like, even just the tabletop game has a whole bunch of different aspects, and it's super cool that that's there. But again, the important part of Warhammer really is the setting, right? So it's this grimdark science fantasy, and if you're unfamiliar with the term science fantasy, it's sort of like science fiction and fantasy. It's basically the idea of you take science fiction but you fill it full of fantasy tropes, and like people are using swords most of the time. Like, it's more melee focused. There's a lot of like knights and elves and all that kind of garbage. A really good example of some classic science fantasy that isn't Warhammer, that actually Warhammer ripped a lot of their concepts off from, is Dune. Is very a bunch of science fantasy kind of thing, where it's science fiction, but there's like a lot of fantastical elements, including the heavy use of melee weaponry and stuff like that. So yeah, part of what makes 40k really cool and different than other like science fantasy properties is that it has this obscene scale to it. So everything is super big and ridiculous. Like, humanity is, like, we think of ourselves as sort of spread across our planet, right? We're like, oh, we have covered Earth. There's like only one continent where people don't live, you know? And I think it's like the fucking Antarctica. Is that the top one? Whatever, the one with the polar bears. I don't think we live there. I think there is a research station in the south where there aren't polar bears. Look, man, I don't know which is which. The point is, we live on one of them. We're basically spread all over our planet. It's that way for the galaxy, where humans are everywhere, right? And that the scale of it is like, oh, there are over 1 million worlds that are human worlds. Like, and 1 million is a very large number. It's hard to conceptualize how big 1 million really is to our squishy little human brains. But 1 million planets with populations the size of Earth or more, sometimes way more, is insane. And there'll be like whole hive cities, which are like the size of continents, and like it's a whole thing. So like things are very, very, very big and very, very, very crazy. It's very much reminds me of like the you know, when you're a kid and you're playing pretend with your friends and you're like, oh, my dinosaur has an impenetrable shield, and like there's like, oh, mine has an impenetrable shield shooting lasers. It's just like that, where everything is super turned up to 11. And very, when I say scale, I don't just mean in size, I also mean like in power. So that kind of stuff is very common. So it's very hard to get a grip on what exactly, how everything works, power and size wise and all that. Like, humans in this thing are basically the smallest, weakest things possible. We are the worst. We are the dregs. And you really feel that when you start looking at the rest of it. Anyway. So the other things that make 40k unique is stuff like their the way the warp travel works. And a lot of sci-fi is just faster than light travel, or like a gravity drive or jump drive or something, where you fold space and go between it. Rather than folding space, how it works in 40k is you open a portal to basically hell. It's called the warp, but you open a portal so it's still warp travel, but the warp is a place that is basically hell. Anyway, you open a portal to hell, and you travel through it because it's less space to go through hell. So it's like nether travel in Minecraft, where if you go to the nether and walk 5 blocks in the nether, you've gone like 20 blocks in the overworld. It's like that. So hell travel. That's very important to the setting. The fact that you have to do this hell travel. There's magic in this setting. I just realized I'm gonna be in the way. Oh, let me move me. Anyway, there's psychic powers and things. It's basically magic, but they just call it psychic energy, psychic powers. But again, it's the fantasy thing. It's that science fantasy. Of course there's gonna be magic. Speaking of, side note, if you guys have any questions at any point, feel free to harass me and I'll answer them. Because this is not just a lecture and go. Again, any questions, hit me up. Any jokes, also hit me up. Anyway, another thing is that that's fun about Warhammer is that no one is a good guy, which seems kind of weird to be excited about, but like, even humanity is this like theocratic fascist nightmare. It's satirical about it, but it is like even the protagonists of the series of the whole thing, like they're not the good guys, but humanity is definitely the protagonists, and as protagonists, it's still hilarious that they're basically villains. You know, you can see this guy here. This is Caiaphas Cain. He is the hero of the Imperium. He sure looks like he's wearing a World War II Nazi hat, doesn't he? Yeah. The humans are a little bit fascist. Just a little fascism as a treat. But fascist and crazy religious, theocratic, will kill you. Will literally burn you as a witch, kind of thing. But every thing is like that. There are no good guys. If I wanted to be a good guy, who should I play? You should not play Warhammer. There are a couple exceptions to the rules. There are people who are better than the most. I would say that humanity can have its good points, and there's some Space Marine chapters, we'll get into Space Marines later, but there are some Space Marine chapters that are considered better than others. Not good, they will still genocide certain people just cuz, but better than others. The Tau might be the closest you'll get to being good guys, but the Tau aren't good guys. No matter what the Tau stands say, they have like weird self-imposed mind control and their own what's it called? They have like a caste system and eugenics, and like they're still not good guys, but they're probably the best, quote unquote. They pretend to be good guys more than anybody else. Everyone else doesn't have that facade of pretending to be a good guy. The Tau, I guess, pretend better. But that's kind of the fun of it, is everyone's kind of a villain. It's just what flavor of villainy you want to do, you know? This music is too intense for this. Hold on. Anyway. Animal Crossing music. Perfectly set. Okay. So the big thing about 40K is, speaking of, you said, if I want to be a good guy, who should I play? That is basically the root of what 40K is I'm in the way again, is factions. So 40K is very much a game of factions. It's very much like sports in that, like, everybody chooses a faction or a sub-faction. They're like, these are my guys. These are the guys I root for. These are the guys I play. These are the guys I read all the lore for. Like, everyone just chooses one. No one is really... I mean, there are some generalists. I'm kind of a generalist. I kind of know a little bit about everything. But most folks will only really take the time to learn about their faction that they enjoy, you know? And anything else they learn about other factions is from other people who enjoy the other factions talking to them about it. Which is another really cool thing, that because there's so much lore... There's like 40 years, Jesus, I can't do math. 40 years of combined books and lore and stuff for this world, that no one can know everything. Even people that are supposed to know everything, they don't know everything. And so you have specialists, like someone who knows everything about the Emperor's Children, or someone who knows everything about the Alpha Legion or Ultramarines, and they can talk to each other and have different information and be able to share it and be like, oh, I learned this about this thing. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's a really cool system for this. And so basically at its gist, at its core, it's this faction warfare stuff, which is basically what this PowerPoint is going to be about. I'm essentially going to go through the factions and the relationships they have with others, and I will talk a little bit about sub-factions. It's kind of like an animal taxonomy kind of thing. You know, like genus, phylum, species, that kind of stuff. So, for example, this is just a quick example of how the factions could work. You have chaos, but you can bring that down. You can think, okay, I'm talking about chaos, but I want to talk specifically about a chaos space marine, because there's also chaos demons, right? So chaos space marine, But specifically, I want to talk about a Slaanesh Chaos Space Marine, right? But specifically, not just a Slaanesh Chaos Space Marine, because there are generic ones, but specifically an Emperor's Children Slaanesh Chaos Space Marine. And if I want to talk about a specific unit, I could talk about a Noise Marine. And it has this taxonomy. So a Noise Marine is part of the Emperor's Children, you know, family, and then Emperor's Children is part of the Slaanesh phylum, and Slaanesh is part of the Chaos Space Marine kingdom, that kind of thing. Like, it goes up and down that way. So you can get really deep into the nitty-gritty about specific units, but also about like specific factions and sub-factions. For the most part, I'm mostly going to talk about the main faction. I might list a couple of the sub-factions very briefly, and sometimes not very described at all. But some of them I just don't know their sub-factions. Like Dark Eldar, they have a bunch of sub-factions. I don't know anything about them, unfortunately. And each of the sub-factions have their own flavors as well. So like, even if you're like, okay, I want to play a melee faction, or whatever. Like, I want to play a melee group, but I want to play Tau. In that example, you'd be kind of shit out of luck, except for there's a whole sub-faction that is the melee Tau. Like, they wear red, they use their katanas. Like, it's a whole thing. So it's possible to basically go into any faction and find a sub-faction. Instead of moving your mouse, could you legit just drag Verby as if he was your mouse? Mean like this? Anyway, so I put over. Yes, I can do that, and I will probably do that now. Thank you. Excellent suggestion, brother. Alright, here's what's to come. We got a bunch of categories. We got a bunch of fucking shit here. I don't agree with this. For the record, I don't agree with this chart. Don't look at this chart. It's fake. It's wrong. Don't look at it. This one's a little better. This one's not good. It just is a good, it's just a good example of, what the heck is going on in general. There's a lot of different, like, categories. Anyway, so we're going to talk about, you know, the categories, the factions, the sub-factions, and we're going to go in this order. Are you ready? Memorize this order because there will be a test. Imperium, Space Marines, Imperial Guard, AdMech, Sisters, and then we can move on to Chaos. We're going to do Chaos Space Marines, Demons, go to Xenos. We're going to do Tyranids, Orcs, Necrons, Tau, Eldar, and Votann. That's the order we're going in. Alright. Memorize this shit. This is what's happening. The problem with moving Verby, I'm learning, is that I can't move him and also use the PowerPoint. So I have to click through it and then move him. Anyway. So, first step, the Imperium of Man. This is going to be the longest section. The longest section. Because, of course, they are the protagonists, and therefore have the most information about them. So there's a lot to talk about here. Basically, it's the same humans that you and I know. I mean, literally the same. One second. There's a canon record of Martin Luther King existing in the 40K universe, which means that the time before 40K, back when it was our time, is now. Like, this is basically what they're saying is basically this is our future. That right now, all our existence is this. So humanity exists as we understand it, but it is now just so far in the future, the year 40,000. That's what the 40K means. That we are significantly different. In fact, so different we have gone through several different eras already. At this point, yeah, just like we do now. So we basically built our way up to what was known as the Age of Technology. And the Age of Technology was essentially Star Trek. So, like, everyone was super enlightened, everyone had, like, perfect lives, and everything was, technology was great, and we had, like, above, like, a huge level of technology that we can't even begin to grasp now. And that's somewhere in the, like, 15th or 25th millennium. And that's when warp technology is invented. That's when the Geller field is invented, which is a special shield that goes around ships so that when you go in the warp, demons can't invade your ship. So it's a protective shield around a ship. So the ability to travel through the warp was a thing. And the warp was actually much more stable. At that time, the warp was not as crazy as it is now. They still had to use Geller fields, but it wasn't nearly as catastrophic if they failed, like it is now. Then something happened, and that's something is specifically humanity had created AI, and the AI rebelled. And when the AI rebelled, it basically took all of humanity's resources to stop them, and it destroyed us so much that all the worlds of humanity became separated and isolated. Some of them reverted back to like medieval technology, and like everything just fell apart because of this giant rebellion by the AI robot brothers. And thus with that became the Age of Strife. Age of Strife. Oh shit. Oh fuck. And that's the 25th, 30th millennium. After the Age of Strife was the Age of Darkness. So this is weird. I feel like I've skipped a bit if you know anything about 40K. And that's because between here, the Age of Strife, about the end of the 30th millennium, there was a being rose up called the Emperor. He called himself the Emperor of Mankind. He was a very powerful psyker. Powerful enough to basically be considered a god, though he very often would say, "Hey, I'm not a god, don't worship me." It's a thing he was very into. And when he rose, he basically reunited the Earth, and then went out to the stars and reunited all of the planets of humanity as best as he could. And he did that with the help of some genetic creations he made called the Primarchs, which were 20 super crazy human genetic creations, and there was a whole thing where he had to go out and find them all because they were scattered by chaos, and it's a long and involved story that I will go into when we get to the actual Space Marines. But the point is, the Emperor of Man got all the people together, and then a thing happened called the Horus Heresy, where one of the Primarchs, Horus, basically rebelled against the Emperor and set everything back a bunch, and a bunch of the worlds got disconnected again, and yeah. So that was in the year 30,000, was the Horus Heresy. The 30th millennium, 31st millennium. I don't remember how millenniums work. Anyway, and then we come to now. Jesus Christ, I'm like, wait, we come to now, the Age of the Imperium, which is the 40th millennium, the 31st to basically the 31st to the 40th. I think we're on the 42nd. Yeah, 42nd. And that is, everything is kind of fucked. The Emperor is dead, essentially. The whole Imperium has become a theocratic nightmare, bureaucratic, fascist nightmare. And that's where we are. That's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves with like places like hive cities, which is this thing right here. Oh, hey, Dez. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate you, buddy. That's 101. Hell yeah. We're moving up in the world. Anyway, so over here is a hive city. It's basically a city-sized continent, or a continent-sized city. There we go. A continent-sized city. And it is, some people who live in these never see the sun. Like they're a big interior building people just live in and toil in and work in. Most of humanity is just struggling through life. If you're a human in this setting, chances are high you were born in a manufactorum, which is a factory. 40K really loves its fake Latin. Are we talking about the end of the Horus Heresy? At the moment, we're talking about Age of Imperium, and then we're gonna move on to the rest of the Imperium. I'm doing a whole overview. I'm trying to speed through the history of the empire of the Imperium as fast as possible, essentially. But yeah, you end up in a hive city, and then you die in a manufactorum before you ever see the sun, and that's how humans live mostly. Some humans are exceptional and they get upgrades, but yeah. So we're doing very light speed run. Because I saw Bricky had a video where he talked about 40K, and it took him 2 hours to go through it. I think this can be done in an hour or less. Anyway, even going through all the factions. Speaking of factions, we're moving on. The big one. 80% speed run. Moving on to the big one. This is Space. These are Space Marines. Probably, I'm surprised. I mean, they do. Okay, actually, I take everything I was about to say back. I was about to say, I'm surprised that Games Workshop hasn't renamed Space Marines, because Space Marines is a very silly name for a very, like, the universe is very silly, but they're trying to take themselves more and more seriously as time has gone on. And so that's why stuff like Adeptus Mechanicus and Adeptus and the Astra Militarum and Adeptus Sororitas and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a generic name, and I was surprised I hadn't renamed them, but then I remembered they did. They did rename them. It's Adeptus Astartes. But no one uses Adeptus Astartes. Sometimes we'll say Astartes, but most of the time that's just reserved for books and things. Everyone I know still says Space Marines. So, yeah. It's too long. You're right. It is too long. That's part of the problem. Like, it was very easy to transition to stop saying Dark Eldar and start saying Drukhari. I don't know why that was an easy transition for me to like swap to, but that one was. But you know, Adeptus Militar. But I did change to Admech, Adeptus Mechanicus, instead of saying what, Skitari? Is that what everyone called them originally? I remember referring to Admech as Skitari way before they were called Admech. I don't remember if that's what, like, I don't know, or like Tech Priests in general. Anyway, the point is, names. Space Marines. They are Games Workshop's favorites. And that's not up for debate, that's just a fact. And that's fine. Every company that makes stuff is going to have a particular faction or especially in faction-based stuff, that is just sort of their favorite. Part of what makes Space Marines easy to be a favorite, though, is how, what makes them easy to be a favorite partly is because of how, like, changeable they are, how, like, you can have a different Space Marine for every different kind of player, every kind of different, like, vibe, and I think that's part of what makes them so popular. Anyway, one of their favorites, what Space Marines are is basically hyper genetically modified humans. They are, you know, I think 8 to 9 feet tall. I forgot how tall Primaris are, but they're basically, you know, 8 to 9 feet tall. They are giant, muscle-bound creatures of scary. They're just scary. And it begs the question, right? Like, this is a question that pops up in 40K a lot. Are they even still technically human? You know, like, would you count a Space Marine as human? I don't know. I don't think I would. I think they're definitely something else, which is fine. I'm glad they're on our side, but... we have 20 Space Marine factions, but out of it, half is dead or gone. Some are dead and some are demons, so... Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to the demon ones in a bit. I may or may not be a Chaos player myself, so... Anyway, those are the good ones. And some are gone. Yeah, the two. Because there's two that are just erased from existence, which is fascinating. We'll talk about that, too. Okay. So... we have to talk about the Primarchs now for real. We glossed over them briefly. Essentially, there was a Primarch for every aspect of the Emperor. You had, and it was like, almost like they were dueled up. There was like 2 of them for every one of those. So, for example, you have Leman Russ and Angron. One is the Emperor's ferocity, and the other is the Emperor's savagery. You know, like that kind of thing, where it's like, they're very similar, and one sort of the darker side of the other. Now, that wasn't originally the plan, obviously, but, you know, chaos. Because, you know, there's some stuff, if you go look at, like, Angron stuff, Angron is actually, like, if you read his book, The Slave of Nuceria, there's a part where it talks about how, well, he's in the slave pits, he can touch people and take away their bad dreams. Like, people are having nightmares, and he just touches them while they're sleeping and takes their dreams away and makes them better. Like, that's the kind of stuff Angron could do. He could calm people down until they put the butcher's nails in his head. So that's a whole story for another day. But the point is that a lot of the Primarchs, each had an aspect to them. Each had a specific, like, thing that they were in charge of, thing that they were good about. And it was like they were sort of like one being split into many. And those Primarchs were then taken, and their DNA was taken and spread across the Space Marines. So each chapter, each Legion of Space Marine is based off of, like, the Iron Warriors. Yeah, Iron Warriors and Iron Hands. They both have very similar things, but they're like a dark version of the other, essentially. Yeah. God, fucking Perturabo. Anyway, sorry, I was thinking about that boy. He's a weirdo. Anyway. Whoops. That was, where was I going with this? Primarchs. So there was 20 of them. 18 of them are known. There are 2 Primarchs that were basically erased from existence, and they... yeah. That's exactly how Perturabo was. God, so cringe. Anyway, 18 of them survived. 2 of them were erased from existence somehow. And the reason for that is basically GW wanted to open up space for people to make their own custom legions and their own custom, like, stuff. So they made 2 that were like, ooh, we don't know who they are, we don't know anything about them, so that anybody could use them to make their own Primarchs for their own stuff. And that's really why they exist. It'd be neat to find out who they are at some point, but I don't think we ever will, because that's, you know, again, they're for custom stuff. So anyway, the Primarchs had their gene seed disseminated down into the rest of the Space Marines, and so for each of the aspects that the Primarchs embodied, there's a set of Space Marines that also embody that aspect. so it's very easy to go through. There's like lots of themes. For example, the list of themes you've got, for loyalists at least, you got the blue Roman bureaucrats, and which are, you can see them up here, the Smurf boys. You got green Arthurian knights, you got fancy vampires, you got engineers, you got siege masters, you got Vikings, fire and forges and blacksmithing. You have like the spec ops folks and like the Mongolian cavalry. Like, you have so many options. If there's a particular theme that you were like, damn, I wish I had, chances are there's something in the Space Marines that you would like. And this is just the founding chapters, because there are a lot of Space Marine chapters. There's too many. There's just too. This is a small picture. There's a much bigger picture I have that is, I should replace this with. It's humongous. So when the Emperor died, by the way, the Emperor is dead. When the Emperor died, there was this thing where, like, they split up the several, like the 9 legions that were left. They split them up into chapters, which were basically their own little sub legions. They could only have 1,000 per chapter, which is not a lot. And you would notice for a place with 1 million worlds, 1,000 per chapter. Yeah, okay, we're getting there. And so even if there's something where you're like, man, I wish I had a chapter themed around purple dragons. Well, guess what? I'm sure it exists. And if it doesn't exist, you can make it, because there's no limit to like what the chapters can have. This is one of the few factions that allow for like basically unlimited customization. I mean, all of them allow you to make your own stuff, but some of them have a better, like, it lends itself better to making your own things than others. For example, actually now's not a good example, but like there are some that like they're just better than others, where you can make your own theme, make your own color scheme or whatever, make your own lore, and some that are just like, well, I mean, you can make your own stuff, but it's not really going to matter too much. All right, anyway. The Azure Inferno. That's cool. Did you go for like a blue? See, and that's exactly it. Someone talks about their chapter, they're like, I made this chapter. And I immediately want to go, oh, cool, tell me about them. Like, what's their symbol? What's their color? Like, I'm assuming blue. But like, I'm assuming, actually, the chapter, probably fire. But still, like, that kind of stuff where you're like, tell me about your thing. And that's part of the fun of this shit. So, but there are also a couple of super specialized Space Marine chapters. Metallic blue with white hazard stripes. Damn, hell yeah. Yes, it is fanfic, but cooler fanfic. But for example, there are some official sub ones that aren't like part of the multitude of chapters. Like up here, that is the Death Watch. Warfic. I'm gonna steal that. Warfic. The Death Watch is like an alien-specific fighting team, and they're from all different kinds of chapters. You can see each of these have a different shoulder, because they still have the shoulder of their original chapter on top of their armor, and they're like black armor. There's the Grey Knights, which was the RIP Grey Knights earlier, which are like demon hunters specifically, and they have a lot of like heraldry and night themes and things like that. So there's a lot of like these little sub factions you can totally get into. Yeah, okay. So for example, I don't think it's on this sheet right now, but there is a group called the Star Phantoms, and they're absolutely my favorite successor chapter. I think they're Dark Angel successors, but they wear all white with some black accents. Their symbol is a pair of skull hourglasses, and they are basically they worship death. Essentially, they're one of the few chapters that still actually worship the Emperor, and they worship him as the Reaper, basically the Grim Reaper thing. I forgot what their name for him is, but they see him as the bringer of death. And that's who they believe. They believe death is like the ultimate thing. And the fact that exists as just a side thing that someone just made up, and then I like grabbed from the wiki page and was like, oh, that's cool, is really cool. That this thing exists, and they're in a couple of books now, but they're not very well known. Like, that kind of thing is kind of cool to have your own little niche thing. But in the tabletop, they had no support for years. Yeah, but they do now, and they were very good recently, I think. I don't know how good they are now. I haven't checked up on Grey Knights in a while, and there's a guy actually at my local Warhammer cafe that plays Grey Knights. I haven't had a chance to play against him yet, but he gets really excited about his Grey Knights. Anyway, so yeah, there's lots of room for customization. including like, I just want to do this color scheme, and you can figure out later what it is. That's totally an option. So Space Marines are very good for like beginners or people who just want like something cool to paint. And that's why they're so popular, partly is because everyone's just like, oh, I'll just do Space Marines, because there's so many options. I can go and do anything with Space Marines. They are the ultimate, like, blank slate for you to do whatever you want on. Which is nice. Oh, wait, I have one more piece to that. Congrats. New chapter. So yeah, that's the gist of them. They are cool dudes with big armor, and they're very fast and very strong and very good. Yeah. And their power level depends on who's writing whatever they're in, but they're usually pretty strong. Okay, moving on from Space Marines to the regular rank-and-file humans, the Astra Militarum. These folks are just your regular people. They are doing their best, the best they can with what they got. Just humans in this world. They are stronger than normal humans. Okay, yes, because of training. That's true. But they're not... I mean, Space Marines, yes. Space Marines are way stronger than normal humans. They're like genetically modified, 8-9 feet tall. Astra Militarum, they are stronger in the sense that they have more training and they're more disciplined. But as far as physically, only as much as you can work out. You know, they're not like... also genetically modified. They're still pretty standard on the human range. Right. So, basically entirely regular humans with training. Mostly. Okay, I say mostly because there is a little bit of this weirdness with abhumans, which I'll just go by real briefly. Abhumans are basically things that are not quite human, but they were once human, and they've just been left on the world long enough they started to evolve differently. But they're human enough that the Imperium still takes them in as abhumans. Yeah, so there's Ogrins, which are big ogre guys. There's Ratlings, which are little dwarf men, essentially. Little like gnomes. Or like the fuck, what are they called? There's cat people, too. People with like gross, weird ears and whiskers and stuff. Like and tails. So there's like Ogrins, rat folks, the cat people. They all are around. There's a group of abhumans that are so abhuman they're actually referred to it. They're actually in the Xenos category now, but yeah, all right, I'll take that. I'll take goblins. But yeah, they're like little hobbit-looking things, little goblin-y things. Anyway, so there's a lot of them. There's a lot of weird little variations, but they're mostly human. The Astra Militarum's main strategy is that humanity is its biggest resource. There are so many humans. The galaxy is absolutely teeming with humans. It's like you left a steak outside for a long time. You come outside and it's just absolutely covered in maggots and you can't even see the steak anymore. That's humanity on the galaxy. We are just a writhing mass of beings that are just basically just infiltrated every little section of the galaxy. And the Astra Militarum uses that to their advantage. They use the fact that we are an endless horde and just recruit as many Imperial Guard as they can and just throw them out into the front lines. Go, all right, here's your las gun. Here's your knife. Go kill some enemy. Go kill some aliens. It's very much like if you've seen Starship Troopers is really, really similar to Astra Militarum. And just like as Des mentioned, the Kriegs, just like the Space Marines, they have lots of very specific themes. They are themed based on different armies across the world. So you have like the Catachan jungle fighters, like up here. They look like Vietnam vets, and that's because their planet is like a jungle planet that's full of like dangerous monsters. Or you have the Kriegers, the Kriegsmen, which are basically they look like World War I gas mask fighters. Or you have the like classic British thing. I think one of these is the Gentine. I think this is the Gentine. Wait, Gentine? Is that what they're called? Yeah. And so on and so forth. And you have like the desert fighters. You have the Russians. Like basically any military that you can think of that's like a classic military from history. They have a representation here. Yeah, the Kriegs are definitely German, but they are German World War I guys. You know. Because of the gas masks. Gas masks were super common in World War I because of all the mustard gas that they then outlawed immediately after that. So yeah. So they have like German themes. there is this small subsection of folk, unfortunately, who do a lot of like, they'll get as close to making little Nazi soldiers as they can with their not Kriegsmen, but with like Astra Militarum, and fuck those guys. Anyway, we're gonna move past that though. We're just gonna forget that those people exist and move on. There's one thing to like the history, but it's another to be like, oh yeah, I just like the history, and then you're putting SS on everything, and it's the whole thing. Anyway, some of this hobby sometimes attracts some weirdos. But the point is, the Astra Militarum is basically, the black and red do look cool. They do look cool. But I mean, like, look at Officer or Commissar Kane here. If you saw just this guy with this big eagle back here in the background, like, you didn't know anything about 40K, you would just assume this is a Nazi. Like, there's no, unfortunately, a lot of the Astra Militarum visuals are very similar. So you don't have to go the extra mile and make it 100% like a direct reference. It's already kind of referencing it, unfortunately. Yeah, actually, there was a jacket that Games Workshop put out that I actually really wanted. It was a leather jacket. Yeah, this is Jurgen back here. Anyway, there was a jacket Games Workshop put out that was a leather jacket. It was super cool. It had a bit of Aquila on the back, and I wanted it. And I was gonna buy it, and then I was showing it to people who I was like, I'm gonna buy this. And I was like, that looks like a very problematic jacket. And I realized, yeah, it looks like it had the Iron Eagle on the back, and then it was like just a leather Iron Eagle jacket. And I was like, okay, well, that's a problem. I can't take that. So yeah, it has some issues with some of its theming, but are they still living? Jurgen? Yeah, I think Jurgen's still alive. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not that deep into the books. I read the first one. Oof, size large. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, there's a bunch of themes. We're gonna go through them real fast, just like Space Marines. We got World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Russian World War II, future, which is the future stuff is up here. This is like the Acadians, or like what we would imagine our future soldiers look like, and then some other shit I don't recognize. Like I have no idea what this is. Oh wait, I do know it's Native Americans. I have no idea what this is. The weird, like, pale skin with like black eyeliner dripping down their face. I don't know what guards unit that is, but Jesus Christ. But yeah, this is usually the faction people choose. Sorry, I just read the Cadia stands and I was trying to think of a witty response, but I can't think of anything. It's a pile of rubble, mate. I know it's the war cry, but like, it's a pile of rubble. Abaddon got Abaddon. I'm gonna say Abaddon. He Cadians stand on other planets. They can no longer stand on Cadia. Anyway, reference. Okay, to explain, Cadia was a planet that was like on the edge of the Eye of Terror. It was basically a good, like a siege world, stopping the chaos from fully coming into the galaxy, and then the leader of Chaos Space Marines, or the de facto leader, basically destroyed the planet. That's the name of the planet. Anyway, moving on very quickly. The Rock took a big ship to the nuts. It sure did. I don't know how that blew up the planet, but I guess Blackstone fortresses don't fuck around. Anyway, yeah. So moving on with more humans. We've got the Sisters of Battle, aka the Adepta Sororitas. These are fascinating. They are absolutely crazy. Straight up are the most religious of zealots. They're basically battle nuns. And they exist because of a loophole. Like a loophole in bureaucracy. So they are not part of the official military of the Imperium. They are the specific... They are the personal military of the ecclesiarchy. The ecclesiarchy is the religious organization, basically the church. So basically a personal church army for the church. The reason why they're all women, which they're all women, is because when the ecclesiarchy existed, it had an army, and it basically had too much power at one point because of the army. And then a law was put into place, or they put out, the High Lords of Terra said, okay, no more ecclesiarchy army. I mean, heresy. Thank you, Dandy. So, you totally distracted my brain. I'm now thinking about heresy. Yes, Ecclesiarchy, army. So the Ecclesiarchy had an army, and then the Imperium said, no more army. And the official law said, I think, the Ecclesiarchy may not have any standing men-at-arms. Like, it specified men-at-arms, which is a type of, like, soldier. It's just a word that means soldier. And they read that and went, oh, no men-at-arms, huh? And then they asked, and then they did this. And then they looked at the laws and went, shit, they're right. We can't stop them now. So the Ecclesiarchy has their own army again. It's just women this time. But they are really strong. They are, in some cases, like close to Space Marine levels of, without any genetic modification, I might add. Like, they are just so faithful that it empowers them to the point that they can just kick ass so well. And of course, their designs are a little impractical. If you take a look here, there's like weird corset armor with boob plate. It's kind of funny, but like, you know what? If they could still kick ass wearing a corset, I'm terrified if they were given like actual full-on power armor. They need a bigger flamer. Yeah, they do. They always need a bigger flamer. So part of their shtick is like, you know, they'll pray to their weapons, and it works. Their weapons actually don't jam if they're praying to them frequently, or they give oils and incense and stuff. It is power armor. Okay, yes, but I mean like the full-on Space Marine Black Carapace armor, you know, that kind of thing. Because they're wearing like human power armor, which is not like, it's not full ceramite, I don't think. It might be. I actually don't know if it's ceramite or not. I have to look into it. But still, it's yeah, it's just normal power. Yeah. Anyway, and speaking of flamers, you mentioned them earlier. That's one of their big themes. They're really into fire. You know, you can cleanse things with it. You can purge things with it. You can burn heretics with it. Anyway, part of their shtick, though, not shtick, but part of their thing is they have less like well-defined themes like the Space Marines or Imperial Guard. Mostly, it's just like, what color of Sister of Battle do you want? You know, it's less about like, I mean, there are different ones like the Martyred Lady and things like that, but they, for the most part, the differences are not well known amongst other people. They're mostly just colors, and you could take any, like, you could create any like Sister of Battle chapter that you want. I don't know what they're called. I think it's chapter, and no one will bat an eye because like, it's not there aren't a whole lot of official ones, and the official ones that do exist are like, you know, pretty generic, like, oh, Sister of Battle. This one gets a 1 up to melee. This one gets a +1 to the shooting. Like, it's there's not a lot of like actual real variety in them, but it's still a super cool theme. Blue and black or red and black, because you have to bleed. Yeah. And I don't know why they all have white hair. I don't know what that's about. It's never really explained, but yes. So they have less themes overall, but they're still pretty cool. Yeah, they mainly adhere to similar dogma style of combat, which is a lot of flamers, a lot of overwhelming, you know, melee when they get into it, that kind of thing. Flamers, though, are pretty big. They're very big with flamers. They are some of the few humans that can shoot a bolter without breaking their own arm. And they do that out of sheer fucking willpower. Oh, okay, like they diet? Okay. Yeah, I figured. I'm just curious of why they diet. Like, is it like based off of a certain, you know, like are they paying homage to a certain like old Sister of Battle or something? I don't know. Anyway, I'm trying to get out of the way. Yeah, and the way they believe in stuff does change slightly. It's just that, for the most part, they are, you know, pretty homogenous, and one Sister of Battle is not too different from another. Welcome. I forgot about this. Okay. So, the Adeptus Mechanicus. I have 2 slides for them. One of them is just a video, which I don't know if I want to play on my stream right now. The other one is an actual description, but I will play a little bit of the video. Give me a second. I'll skip to what's the important part. The point is that they have a very specific style. These are like, imagine if, it's only like a few seconds. We'll watch it and I'll talk a little bit and point things out. So it's transformative. Oh wait, I need to turn on the audio. Yeah, there we go. 1 second. There we go.
From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me. I craved the strength and certainty of steel. I aspired to the purity of the blessed machine. Your kind cling to your flesh, as if it will not decay and fail you. One day the crude biomass that you call a temple will wither, and you will beg my kind to save you. But I am already saved. For the machine is immortal.
Anyway, the point is, robot priests, cool. So they are very much like this. Yeah, right? It's such a good, that video is such a good, everyone's like, what's the Adeptus Mechanicus about? I like to just drop them that video. I was like, watch that. Watch that intro. It'll make sense. These are, they take the same idea where they're very like theocratic and interested in worship. But they worship technology. This, which I believe is actually sort of like, it's definitely some sort of like satire reference to humanity, right? Anyway, the point is, they're basically transhumanism taken to the extreme. So how much your music is still off? Thank you, I appreciate you. Go back to gnome theme. Perfect. The machine god, yeah. So, they believe in the Omnissiah, which is the machine god. They believe that the Emperor is a manifestation of that Omnissiah. And so by doing the Emperor's will, the dead Emperor's will, they are doing the will of the machine god. Now, that sounds a little crazy. Oh, sorry, I'm getting distracted. It sounds a little crazy, but we'll talk about that in a second. The point is, I got distracted with a thing. Transhumanism. This is the thing where you turn into not a human. Where you basically, what point do you become not a human? Like, if you replace your heart, are you still human? I mean, yeah, the rest of your body's still flesh. If you replace your brain, are you still human? Like, if you replace it with machines, how much of your body needs to be left for you to still be counted as human? That's the whole question of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and it's a super neat one. So yeah, they're religious fervor but machines. Talked about the Omnissiah already. They believe that inside every single piece of technology, whether it be a robot or a gun or, the meme is a toaster, but every piece of technology, there is a machine spirit. And it's kind of weird, but they're not wrong. They keep the brain because they hate AI. Yes, but they only keep sections of the brain. We'll get there. And they hate AI because of the whole. For the record, they hate AI because of the you remember when the AI attacked humans and killed everyone? The Age of Strife. That's why they hate AI. It's like ancient knowledge that like AI bad. Yeah. Used a printer, machine used to have a spirit of their own. Yes, it's like that. It's like the idea that like, oh, this particular machine spirit's very helpful, or this one's very annoying, this one's very cocky. And like there are some machine spirits that like, if they're in a gun, for example, and you don't pray to it ahead of time, you don't do the incense, you don't chant to it or whatever, it will make sure to jam itself in a time where you need it the most. Like it doesn't give, like machine spirits are a little rude sometimes. So it's important that you pray to your gun. Yes. So Adeptus Mechanicus, they're fucking wild. Part of their thing, also, you wouldn't think this is true, but a lot of them don't believe that invention is good. You'd think that they'd be really into inventing things, but like, they don't really. Everything they own is essentially based off of a pattern called an STC, and they have to go out and find STCs from the existing Dark Age, or from the existing Age of Enlightenment or Age of Technology. So they're looking for old STCs from the Age of Technology, and they're trying to repurpose them here, essentially. They're trying to, get them. There is a couple of rogue Adeptus Mechanicus that are totally into invention and totally down to make new stuff. Belisarius Call, for instance, even though he's the leader of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and he's like, yeah, invention's fine. But a lot of the more dogmatic ones will stick to STCs, which is like standard template construct, I think is what that stands for. So yeah, a lot of them they're looking for their paint by numbers explanations on how to build stuff. People like Belisarius Call will make stuff on their own anyway. But for the most part, they're just looking for, pre-existing tech from the age of technology. As I stated earlier, they hate AI. AI is not allowed. They have these things called servitors, which are basically lobotomized people that they have turned into a pseudo AI because AI isn't allowed. So they still have a biological brain for the most part. Usually that brain has been highly augmented. Same thing with theirs. They augment their own brains too. But the brain will be highly augmented, and but they just all to avoid AI. Basically, they just want to avoid any artificial intelligence any intelligence that has no soul is heresy, and they will not take it. Except for Belisarius and the Belisarius Inferior, but that's a whole different subject. He may or may not have a secret AI inside the McCragg's honor, but whatever. Anyway, yeah, explain servitors already. So also, they're only sort of part of the Imperium because the Emperor basically took over Mars. And when the Emperor was first expanding out of Earth, he was like, hey, join us. And they were strong enough that they could say no at the time. Like the Emperor didn't have the forces or the ability to stop them because they had the best way to manufacture technology and the best technologies. And so he really literally couldn't say, no, I'm going to fight you until you join us. He was like, okay, what if we made some concessions? And so he let them worship the Omnissiah. He let them sort of have their own independence. Like, he basically had to make a bunch of concessions to the Adeptus Mechanicus in order to get them into the fold of the Empire. So they're part of the Empire, only kind of. They could, in theory, at any point break away and decide that they're on their own again. Although it's been 10,000 years or more, and at this point they're pretty well embedded, and they are like a lot of the leadership at this point is Mechanicus. Like there's a lot of the ecclesiarchy that has a bunch of Mechanicus embedded in it. So it's not. It's highly unlikely that they'll ever leave the Imperium because it's a good horse to have stuck. It's a good horse to have put your bet on, for them at least. Talked about that, man. I'm getting ahead of my points. That's fine. Anyway, there's more to the Imperium. Oh, it's it. I like the troll guy that made the Iron Strider. Yeah. Yes. So, we can talk about that for a second. There was a guy who made an Iron Strider, which actually is in this picture right here. This guy on like a little walker. It's called an Iron Strider. The Iron Striders were so fuel efficient, as stated, that they did not ever run, like basically they could run forever. They're actually perpetual motion machines inside. They can just go forever. They never have to be turned off. And they could be turned off, but like you'd never need to refuel them. And he made this, and then they killed him for something. I don't remember what they killed him for. It might have been even making that, like inventing something. But because they killed him, and he was the only one that knew how he did this, they don't know anything about them. They can't replicate them, and they don't even know how to turn them on. So the only way they've kept using them is by leaving them on for centuries, because they're just afraid if they turn them off, they can't turn them on, and we'll never get them to work again. Because they killed the one guy who knew how to use them. That's the kind of shit that's going on here. It's very, very weird. So the Phos, there's a weapon called the Phos Phoenix, which is like the last phosphor weapon ever, and phosphor is like a sentient flame. It's funky. There's a bunch of stuff like that, and the guy who found the Phos Phoenix STC and made it destroyed the STC, and before destroying the STC, he was killed with the Phos Phoenix. Like, it's a whole thing. Although they took away weapon war gear, so you can't equip your Mechanicus with the Phos Phoenix anymore, but it was a weapon you could equip in 9th. Just live my panel. Yeah, right? Yeah, they have like planes where they run around, like little like pens where they like do little circles. Yeah. Because they are also, once again, machine spirits in there, so they're sort of sentient. Anyway, the other Imperium folk, there's a couple of honorable mentions that don't really have their own armies anymore, but they get mentioned. Oh, I guess. Okay, when I made this PowerPoint, things were a little different. So Custodes is in here, and they have their own army for sure. I literally got tabled by a Custodes army the other day. But anyway, there's honorable mentions that don't get a lot of limelight. So we're going to talk about those real quick. First off, we're going to talk about the Adeptus Custodes. These are basically super Space Marines. These for the kind of vibe they give. This is the army that Henry Cavill plays. So they're basically the chattest of all chads. They are very, very strong, and they are the Emperor's personal bodyguard, and have only recently started leaving Terra, which is Earth. Only recently started leaving Terra to go out into the world, or out into the greater galaxy, and do stuff for the Emperor. Fun fact: did you know why these guys' special army ability is like karate? There's a reason for it. Anyone know why it's karate? No? I will tell you. The reason why it's karate is because of where they are based and who the Emperor is. So, the Emperor is actually, despite artwork, often described by most people as having dark brown skin. He's like, that's usually, they usually refer to it as umber skin tone for the Emperor, for people who like see him, despite all the artwork of a blonde white man. And you know, that's just what happens with art. And these guys all hang out at the Imperial Palace. Where is the Imperial Palace? It's on Mount Everest. It's in the Himalayas. So they are using the Emperor's own fighting techniques, fucking martial arts, like Asian martial arts, to fucking happens with religious figures, you know, skin turning. Yeah, I know. Anyway, it's just because they're from the Himalayas, and they've got, I know karate is Japan, but like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, they're like monks, basically. They're warrior monks. It's super cool. So he's a monk. Yeah. It's crazy to me. I always forget. I literally always forget that Imperial Palace is in the Himalayas until they mention it in a book or something. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It's in basically India. Like, weird. Anyway, moving on from the Adeptus Custodes. Oh yeah, what is Space Marines but bigger? Forgot I wrote that. The Inquisition. That's this fella over here. Oh, actually, we'll talk about them, I think, later. The Inquisition is, yeah, the bananas. Yeah. Inquisition is basically the highest authority of the Imperium main manifest. So, Highstone manifest going. They are, they're like free agents that can do whatever they want, essentially. This is a picture of Eisenhorn, which is the most popular Inquisitor everyone knows about because he has a book series for him. It's very like noir detective kind of thing. It's really cool. But Inquisitors basically have free reign to do whatever the fuck they want, have whatever teammates they want. Like, they could hire aliens, they could hire basically anyone. Eisenhorn has a teammate that is a blank, which is someone who is psychically null, who used to be a prostitute. Like, that's the kind of stuff. They just like pick up people. It's very noir. Like, oh, I found this person on the street. We're gonna use their abilities for stuff. They're cool. They often work with a thing called a rogue trader. Rogue traders are like just traders that also have license to do basically whatever. With very little Imperium oversight. But any rogue traders have Imperium oversight. These are the guys who are oversighting them. The Inquisition is wild. And the Inquisition is also broken up into many different organizations or ordos. So Eisenhorn is part of the Ordo Xenos, which is an organization based on focusing on dealing with aliens and alien problems. There's the Ordo Hereticus, which is for, heresy and things. There's the Ordo the Office of Assassinorum, which is its own assassin thing, which I don't even know if I talk about in this slide or not. There's a bunch of there's the Ordo Chronos, and they're having a civil war about what date it is. And at one point, the Ordo Chronos disappeared. Anyway.
Congrats on 100 followers. If you have 100 followers in a dark alley, you'd be fucking terrified.
Yeah, I thought about that this morning. I was excited when it happened, but I was not like as excited as I was like, yeah, woo, 100, woo. And then I thought about how many 100 people is that have decided to follow me, and I was like, fuck. That's a lot of people. Like, if I was in a room with 100 people that were all just staring at me, I'd be terrified. That's the same deal, yeah. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Yeah, so Inquisition. They're cool. I like the Inquisition. They're crazy. There's a lot of weird Inquisitors. Well, you are a fun burb. Well, thank you. Appreciate you. Inquisition. um, there's a lot of weird Inquisitors. Each Inquisitor has its own, like, really specific, weird, it's idiosyncratic shit, where they're all very different. And they're a lot of fun to read about. There's an Inquisitor who, like, tames dragons and shit. Anyway, point is, there's a lot of weird ones. And they all have their own things and their own way of doing things. Yeah. I never clicked forward on those. Okay, the Office Assassinorum. I don't have a picture for them. They are essentially assassins. There's like 4 or 5 different schools of assassins. If you want to know more about these, I don't know much. You're going to have to look it up, honestly, on your own. But it pretty much makes, you know, they're the best assassins the Imperium has. They're good enough that one of them had killed a Primarch. So, like, one assassin from the Office Assassinorum killed a Primarch. Now, admittedly, the Primarch let himself die to prove a point, but still, they still killed him. Imperial Knights are these giant things. It's hard to tell the scale on these, but Imperial Knights are giant walkers. Like, just a person sits in the head, and then there's also Imperial Titans, which are even bigger, where you have, like, a whole crew of people in there. Taming what? Dragons. Oh, you know what? I can just show you. Give me a second. We're taking a small detour. Hold on. Small detour. Armies of the Imperium. Agents of the Imperium. Damn it. Hold on. This webpage breaks all the time, and I have to refresh it to get it to work. If you're on it for too long, it just shuts down. Agents of the Imperium. So we got some Office of Assassinorum guys, and then Inquisitor Cortex, which he has like a bird and a hammer and Space Marine power armor. I don't know what's happening there. Let's see. You got other weird Inquisition stuff like the monkeys. Inquisition's so weird. This guy, Ordo Xenos, Lord Inquisitor Kyra Draxus. He tames dragons. She tames dragons? I actually don't know. She tames dragons. See, she got cool power armor and a big dragon skull and like an Eldar gun. That's definitely a shuriken weapon. And I think like they're literally allowed to do whatever the hell they want. Inquisitors have free reign for whatever. Anyway, Imperial Knights, big robots, super cool, piloted by noble knight families, humans mostly, not Space Marines. And they're very, like, if you like the knight heraldry and stuff, these are what you would want to do. I mean, you could also do Dark Angels, but, like, this is the biggest heraldry stuff. They literally have giant heraldic shields right there on the pauldron that show off, like, this is my family, this is what we're into, you know, like that kind of thing. So they're big into things. Yeah, heraldry houses, stuff like that. Knights are cool. I'm thinking about getting some knights at some point because I like the big models and they're cool. Probably Chaos Knights, though, which we'll get to. Sisters of Silence are technically part of the Adeptus Custodes, these ladies here. I wish they were their own army because I want to collect Sisters of Silence. I think they're really fucking cool. I don't like Custodes. I think they're really fucking dumb. No offense to Custodes players. I don't like the big penis helmets. I don't like the big banana helmets. And I don't like that they're like the Mary Sue Marines. I don't like them. I like these. These are cool. Look at that. These are psychic blanks, so their presence alone makes people feel really uncomfortable. They don't exist psychically in the warp. They're basically like soulless beings, essentially. They're not soulless, but they're basically soulless. And it makes any human near them very uncomfortable. Any psyker near them, it causes them physical pain and fear. And demons really struggle against them. They're like great demon killers. They should really be helping out the Grey Knights. I don't know what they're doing with the Custodes, but the point is, the Sisters of Silence are really fucking cool. I think they're awesome as hell. I wish they were their own army. But the way that GW is like cracking down on small armies, I doubt they ever would be. Because they're pretty much all just units like this. Anyway. Yeah. So, they're very good at anti-psyker stuff. If you can't see them, you can't fight them. Yeah, exactly. Like if you're trying to psychically attack them, you can't. They just don't exist. I was going to say, they're also actually silent. They're not just called Sisters of Silence for nothing. They don't speak. They use sign language to talk, which all Space Marines learn their sign language. They can communicate with them on the battlefield and stuff, but like they don't communicate at all with their... They have an oath of silence, which is what the mouth guard is for. And Anyway, speaking of demons, this lad right here, guess what? Basic teaching. Next up, demons. Woo! Go demons. Woo! I'm a little biased. So the demons, this is going to be a big explanation. The warp. Okay, I got to explain the warp first. The warp is hell. Shorthand, the warp is hell. But the warp is basically all of the universes, all of the galaxies, all of the universes. I think the warp, as we know it, is only for our galaxy. I mean, the warp exists outside our galaxy, obviously, but like, I think the warp as we know it from our chaos gods is only our galaxy. Anyway, the warp is a basically gestalt entity of its own that is made up of all the consciousness, of all the thoughts of every living being. Yeah, Chaos Demon Corn. Exactly. We'll get there. We'll get there. It's the consciousness of all of the demons. Or sorry, all the humans, all of the Eldar, all of the whoever, anyone that's sentient, except the Tau, which don't count for some reason. Anyone that's sentient, their soul and ideas and wants and desires and needs all fuel into the warp, all their dreams, and that energy becomes physical things. So, yeah. If you have a soul, you manifest the warp. Exactly. That's exactly it. If you have a soul, the warp is part of you and you are part of the warp. Now, how much you can manifest it depends on if you're psychic or not, and how much it fucks with you depends on if you're psychic or not. If you ever played Dragon Age, or know anything about Dragon Age, the Fade and the warp are basically the same thing. The Fade is full of demons, and it's where they pull their magic from. It's the same thing here. Magic is from the warp. Warp is full of demons. Yeah, exactly. They have no like official soul or whatever. But technically, neither do the Tau. The Tau don't show up in the warp either. So, do the Tau have souls? Who the fuck knows? Anyway, so the warp is this thing. The warp, all those energies, all those thoughts, they eventually coalesce into a single giant entity called a Chaos God. Now, there are more than 4 Chaos Gods. I know. You Warhammer nerds are like, no, there's 4. Yeah, and yes, those are the big ones. But there are more than 4 Chaos Gods. And they vary in power and size. Like Vashtor, the Archaphane, he's not quite a Chaos God. But he's really close. Like, he's really close to just being a god himself. But not a big one. He wouldn't rival the power of the big 4. But he would definitely technically be a Chaos God. For example, in Age of Sigmar and in Warhammer Fantasy, there is a minor Chaos God called the Great Horned Rat. Pseudo Chaos Gods. Yeah, okay. Pseudo Chaos Gods. But there's a minor Chaos God called the Great Horned Rat. And he is sort of he's the god of the Skaven. Yeah, the Skaven, which are rat people. But he is technically part of Nurgle's domain, kind of. Like, he kind of half rests in Nurgle, half not. But he's still a god. He has his own domain. Yeah, he has his own warp. But, like, he uses, like, it's weird. He's kind of still half connected to Nurgle in this weird way. Because rats. Anyway, the point is, because rats and their disease-carrying fleas and shit. I'm getting off track of telling you about gods. But the point is, the Great Horned Rat is a good example of a minor Chaos God. And in power, it's like the difference in power between you and a cat. You know? Like, if we're comparing ourselves to ants, okay? Like, an ant looks up at you and goes, shit, that's a very powerful being. And then looks up at a cat and goes, fuck, that's a very powerful being. It's obviously a cat is less powerful than us, but it's still, the power difference is so great that it doesn't matter. Yes, I'll get to the Emperor in a second. Landscape is whack. No idea about Skaven warp. I play and research rats with an understanding of rat lore. Technically, the Emperor is a Chaos God, more like an Order God. Yes. So the Emperor also has his own demons. I didn't really talk about it, but they are called... You have there's a Space Marine Demon Legion. Demons in quotes. They are... and they're not demons as in Chaos God. They're demons as in, like, Order God for the Emperor. And they are the Legion of the Damned. And, yeah, Legion of the Damned. And then also Saint Celestine is a demon, because she can't die, and she keeps coming back, and she has wings, and literally glows. Like, there's stuff like that going on. But anyway, so yes, the Emperor could technically be considered a chaos god, a minor chaos god, or an order god. I mean, all the elf gods are chaos gods too. Like Yvraine, not Yvraine, she's a regular elf. What's the name of the elf in the one that Nurgle has hostage? I forgot her name. She's a chaos god. Cain is a chaos god. I haven't seen the Hammer and Bolter short yet. I will though. Yeah, Cain's a chaos god, exactly. Technically, mandrakes, which are dark elf units, Dark Eldar, Drukhari, they are just possessed Drukhari. Like, they are possessed by their own warp gods that aren't the big four. Anyway, Isha, yeah, that's her name, thank you. Anyway, we're getting distracted. There's more than 4 chaos gods is the whole point I'm trying to make. But there are 4 main ones that everyone knows. Yes, Siagoreth is a chaos god as well. Or something, I don't know. The only gods that aren't chaos gods specifically, like aren't Gestalt chaos entities, would probably the Catan. Yeah. Because there's the Laughing Catan, but there's also Siagoreth, which is his own. Anyway, we could be here all day if we're talking about gods and chaos gods. We're gonna move on because there's a lot. So there's 4 main ones, and the 4 main ones are the ones that everyone knows and what they'll usually talk about when they say chaos gods. Ignore this. Forget I said anything about that. We'll talk about that later. Yeah, I have Emperor. Anyway, they're all birthed by the desires of sentient life. Desires, wants, dreams, whatever. So we're going to go in order and talk about the various gods. We have Khorne. Khorne is the god of murder, honor, rage, courage, and martial prowess. So if you notice, some of those things were very bad. Murder, rage. Some of them were very good. Honor, courage, martial prowess. Like, chaos gods aren't necessarily evil full stop. They're mostly evil. 98% evil. They have a little bit of good to everything. Each one of these have a little bit of good to their thing. Is he a big lump with knobs? Does he have the juice? The Heckin and the Gork and Mork are the last remaining Corks, and Orc believe. Oh my god! Stone knife that is brilliant. We are going to talk about Corks. But that's brilliant. I didn't even think about that, and I love that shit. Like, they got apotheosis because of their belief in them being gods. That's amazing. I love that. Anyway, yeah, they're not evil. They're just manifestations of all emotions of living beings. Unfortunately, living beings tend to suck, and thus they are predominantly suck. Anyway, so Khorne, god of murder, god of honor, rage, courage. Have you ever heard skulls for the skull throne, blood for the blood god, whatever, you know, those lines? They're referring to Khorne. Khorne is the blood god. He sits on a throne of skulls. Every skull taken for the blood god gets placed on the throne. He is the god of war. All he cares is that blood... The phrase is, Khorne cares not from where the blood flows, only that it does, or something like that. Like... Milk for the cornflakes. Yeah. Basically, the point is, he wants murder. He doesn't care why or how. As long as murder happens, and preferably murder happens like when you're angry, that he's happy. You have given something to Khorne by killing something. So in a way, Khorne is winning the great battle, the great game right now, because there is so much war happening all over the galaxy that Khorne is so happy all the time. Next up, you have Slaanesh. This is a big topic. Slaanesh has a lot going on. We're just going to talk about Slaanesh's general being. We're not really going to talk about how they exist until later, until we get to the Eldari. Anyway, Slaanesh is the god/goddess. It's kind of unclear. Of excess, pride, pleasure, pain. So, like, people go into the memes hard about Slaanesh being all about sex and stuff. But like the other 50% of Slaanesh is pain. Like, this is a demonette. A demonette is just as likely to fuck you as it is to skin you. Maybe at the same time. Like, they will. All right, I'm about to say some really heinous shit. Cover your ears for about the next 30 seconds if you don't want to hear some really awful things that are gonna get put in your brain as like imagery. And I'm sorry, but this is the best way to describe it. Here it goes. A demonette is most likely to skin your penis and then fuck you while it's still raw. That's the kind of thing a demonette would do. It's just awful. Slaanesh is the excess of everything, but also excess of food, excess of like, just everything. They are fascinating. Ew. Yeah, Warhammer, exactly. Slaanesh is awful. That's I love the title, Blistering Barnacles, while I talk about this. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, Slaanesh is wild. Anyway, moving on. Nurgle, my boy. Nurgle is the god of decay, disease, but also joy and nature. So he's all about like decay, disease, entropy, Papa Nurgle, but he's also, all of his followers are very happy, they're very excited. A lot of them play instruments while they're like giggling and dancing around. And he loves the cycle of nature, where nature's like, oh, something grows and then it dies, it decays, and that decay becomes food for the next thing to grow, like death and rebirth. Yeah, exactly. He's very much like cyclical and stagnant, but I don't know, he's interesting. He often gets lumped into just the god of disease and grossness, which is part of what he is. The other part, though, is, nature and the cycle and joy. Remember the little nerdling that did something bad and he didn't punish it? Yeah, actually, there is, I don't know if this is the story you're talking about. I feel like he should be the oldest brother. Yeah, like the one that's the most wise. I don't know if this is the story you're talking about, Stone Knife, but there is a great unclean one named Kugath, the Plague Father. Kugath was a nerdling, who was dancing on Papa Nurgle's shoulders while he made a disease. And Grandfather Nurgle made the greatest disease he'd ever made ever in the history of the universe. It was the best disease. It was the most potent. It was the most deadly. It was going to ravage the galaxy. And while Kugath was dancing on Grandfather's shoulders, he fell in. He slipped and fell into the cauldron. And when he fell into the cauldron, he drank it all up because it was so tasty. And he drank the disease up. And basically there was none left, and he became a great unclean one. Make go of it and you drank it. Anyway, he became a great unclean one, and he felt so bad about it that Kugath doesn't smile. Kugath is just a sad boy, and he's constantly trying to make a disease that's as good as the one that he drank for the grandfather. But grandfather didn't care. He was just happy that someone got to enjoy it, and he sent his little nerdling off. And Kugath is now first in grandfather's favor, basically. Like he is Nurgle's favorite, despite the fact that Kugath believes he fucked up so horribly that he's sad all the time. But grandfather Nurgle's like, dude, you're great, you're awesome, I love you. So that's the kind of thing Nurgle is. Moving on. Good old Tzeentch. I don't play anything with Tzeentch in it, but he is my favorite. I think if I played demons, I would probably have a lot of Tzeentch units, because he is the god of insanity, the god of plans, the god of magic, the god of knowledge, and the god of learning. He is all about like knowing as much as you can. He's like, I need all the knowledge, but also having too much knowledge, being completely insane because you have more knowledge than is good for you. Things like that. Like he has a plan all the time. Exactly. This. And like, but because he's the god of insanity, he'll have a plan. And then that plan, he'll make a plan against his own plan, so that the plans are fighting each. He's fun. He's a wacky dude. He's the god of change. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what's happening as long as something is changing and something is happening. That's his whole shtick. Something's got to do stuff. Things have to happen. He doesn't care what things are happening. As long as things are happening, he wins. He doesn't care. He's happy. So he's actually happiest when none of them are winning. Because they have this thing called the Great Game, which is all the gods trying to fight each other for supremacy of the galaxy. But Tzeentch is happiest at technically winning if they're fighting. Because as long as there's fighting, there's change happening. And so he's winning. If everyone were to die and it's just Tzeentch, well, now it's just stagnant and he doesn't have any change anymore. He can't make any plans. There's no more. He loses. He cannot win. If he wins, he loses. It's really funny. She's the god of change. Sorry, man. I'm looking at a dollar bill on me. Oh, Lord. For example, one of his favorite demons is this. It's not maybe this one, but it looks like this. I forgot his name. Kairos. Kairos the Fate Weaver. He's a two-headed bird, and one head can only see the future, and the other bird can only see the past. So, like, they can't see the exact present. He can't see it. But he can see the direct future, and he can see the direct past, which is fascinating. It's like that kind of weird shit where everything's funky. Or these little pink horrors which will split into blue horrors, which will then split into brimstone horrors. And it's just stuff like that is cool. It's just like that. So, for each of the chaos gods, there are chaos demons. I'm not going to go into the specifics of each demon, but safe to say that the demons are manifestations of the warp's will. Sometimes demons are people that have turned themselves into demons or been turned into demons through worship. Just cross your eyes and you'll see the present. Someone should tell Kairos that. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. So yeah, sometimes demons are people that have been made into demons. Most of the time, demons are just created through sheer warp energy. So most demons are just flat out creations of the warp. It'd be nasty to fight. You know what move you're making just before you're making it. Yes! Just like Sanguinius and Conrad Kurz, they both did that shit. But we'll get to those. Well, we won't really get to them, but they both did that. Just for the record, both those Primarchs had future sight and they used it in battle. Anyway. Yeah, so they all have demons. They're all different. They're all fun. If you want to look at the demons, just go to the Games Workshop web store. Go check them all out. They're cool. Some of the demons are only on the Sigmar side, so like check them out, but they sometimes work for 40k as well. Yeah. Moving on. We have the big bad spiky boys. Chaos Space Marines are Space Marines, but Chaos. So here I put 4 pictures of each of the different Chaos Gods and their Space Marines. You have a Emperor's Children / Marine. You've got Khorne, Khorne Berserkers. I think that's Karn the Betrayer up there, maybe. Although he doesn't have 2 axes like that. He only has Gorechild. So it's probably not Karn. You get a Rubik Marine, or no, Terminator Armor, I guess, which is Tzeentch. And then Nurgle guys down here. They also came out with a new demon mini. The demon also apparently killed one Baelai. Oh, we actually learned which demon that is? Interesting. Actually, Des, with 40k, you can demon soup it just fine. They don't care if you do like all demons from all the gods. It's when in Sigmar you have to choose one god, but in 40k you can technically do all of them. They kind of expect it weirdly. Anyway, yeah. So the Chaos Space Marines are just what if Space Marines but Chaos. They're the favorite villains. They're all over the place. Like if you play the Space Marine video games, you start fighting either orcs or Tyranids or whatever, and then it always turns into Chaos. Angron, that's the name. Angron killed him? Really? I thought they were thinking it was Abaddon. I didn't know Angron killed him. Team Sassy Nurgling. Sassy Nurgling. Nurglings are fun. Nurglings are little demons. Angron killed Yarrick. That's crazy. Well, Angron's about to meet the business end of an orc. Anyway. So, Chaos Space Marines, the favorite villain. Again, Space Marines, but what if Chaos? Evil Mega GMO humans. And so, the other Primarchs that fell to Chaos basically became Demon Primarchs. We're talking about that right now in chat. Angron is one of the Demon Primarchs. He was the Primarch of the World Leaders, who was very, very angry. His name was Angron. Who would have guessed he'd be angry? Anyway, good enemies is hard to find. That was interesting. Interesting. Sorry, getting distracted by chat. So yeah, Demon Primarchs, there's Angron, there's Fulgrim, there's Magnus, and so on and so forth. The Primarchs have become basically as close to demons as possible. We're not going to go into the list. Not thankfully, Chaos Space Marines are one of the types that have very specific themes that you can grapple onto. They're like they're not just like generic. You have like a bunch of different, very, very highly specialized themes that you can like, oh, I like that theme. Yeah. Rogel Dorn. Rogel Dorn's not a Chaos Demon. Oh, you mean a Primarch in general? It's like, Rogel Dorn is loyalist, sir. Anyway. No, Primarch. Okay, yeah. Totally. Favorite, yeah. Anyway, the list goes like this. We have narcissistic pleasure hounds, no-nonsense bunker builders, Batman, but with torture, blood for the blood, skull for the skull throne, bloated, happy, horribly diseased, magic dust boys, religion do be like that, though. And we take everyone here. Oh, yeah, and I am Alfargus. So this is meme versions of describing all the different types of themes there are, but there are several different times. Like, this is like a CIA gone insane. We have, like, the generic. We have crazy religious cultists. We've got magic folks. We got disease guys, angry mans. There's a lot of options for Chaos Space Marines. In case you're curious, I play Death Guard. I play the bloated, happy, horribly diseased Space Marines. This is my peoples. This is what I play. And yeah, Alpha Legion's fucking great. And not all of them worship Chaos Gods. They might be called Chaos Space Marines, but like the Night Lords don't worship Chaos. Not really. They're more of just they're just evil. The Night Lords are just straight up. They don't need a god to be evil. They just are. they're just evil. They like to skin people and stuff, and yeah. Fabius Bile, yeah, which is fascinating because technically he is Emperor's children, which is Slanesh, but I have Death Guard too. Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah, Death Guard. So yeah, there's a lot of options for Chaos Space Marines. If you're interested, I look into them. I'm thinking about doing a PowerPoint for every sub-faction, not sub, for like, you know, like a whole Chaos Space Marine PowerPoint kind of thing, or a whole Space Marine PowerPoint, or a whole Dark Eldar power, you know, that kind of stuff. But that's a lot of work. This one already took a while to make. Moving on. The Eldar, or the Eldari, so it's more copyrightable. Especially Chaplain Bald. I'm sure that's really his name. The Eldar are space elves. And everything that entails. So the Eldar are directly ripped from Warhammer Fantasy, including their helmet shape. The elves in Warhammer Fantasy look just like this. Like, literally just like this. And... yeah, but they're still pretty cool. They've got some cool stuff going on. So Eldar are one of the more ancient races. They're old. They're not quite the oldest race you can play, but they are pretty dang close to it. They were around and ruling the galaxy a million years before humanity was a protozoa. They are ancient, according like in relation to us. They were created by a race of beings called the Old Ones. They were created for an ancient war. So the Old Ones went to war with some beings called the Catan. Get into more specifics later, but the Catan are essentially big evil space gods, and the Old Ones... Kill him and likes this part of the stream. Good old G-Man. They were created for an ancient war by the Old Ones. They're basically the commanders. The Old Ones created two different types of units. They created two different types of creatures. The Krorks, which we'll get into, and the Eldari, which were basically the commanders for the Krorks. Yeah, the war was called the War in Heaven. There it is. The War in Heaven. And the Eldari were created for that. When the war was over, the Eldar just continued on. Like, the old ones were dead, and the old Eldar just were like, all right, well, I guess we're on our own now. So yeah, they were created for literally as genetically engineered soldiers to be psychic commanders for the Krorks. Basically fantasy elves. They're like alive. They're fast. Yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. They got their pointy ears. It's classic. They have this thing called the Webway, which is basically a space condom through the warp. It allows them to just like go through the warp without having to interact with any demons or anything, and they can use it without ships. They have ship-sized Webway portals, but it's mostly here, like this kind of thing, where they can just send troops through to teleport to any planet. Super neat. Yeah, warp travel made easy. Space condom. It's what it is. Speaking of the Webway, yeah, they don't need the Astronomicon, which is oh god, there's so many things. The Astronomicon is basically following the Emperor's light like a North Star in the warp. Anyway, the point is, Webways. I'm getting distracted. The Webway is protected by this group of people here called the Harlequins, the space clowns, elf clowns. They worship the laughing god Sheogorath, whatever you want to call him. Yes, that's the same name as the god from the Elder Scrolls. They're the same thing, basically. And he's in charge of the Webway, I guess, and they're in charge of the Webway because of that, and they protect it from anyone. But they're not... They literally just protect it from damage. They don't care if you're using it, really. as long as you're an Eldar. All right, we gotta talk about Slaanesh now. I know we just finished talking about demons, but we gotta talk about Slaanesh. It's just what's happening. Whoops, back up. So, the Eldar went a little crazy. They were so powerful and so just long-lived, and they could do anything, and they had all the time on their hands that they just started getting more and more depraved. You know when an empire starts failing and they start having like blood sports and stuff, so like when Rome started to fail and they started to have like gladiators and things, imagine that, but on a galactic scale. And it's like just excess, basically. Everything would be super excessive. Like, oh, I want one grape. Well, let us create an entire grape farm and in seconds create 1 billion grapes turn a planet into a grape farm, make all the planet into grapes and then eat one grape and move on. Like, that's the kind of shit we're talking about they were doing just because they could. And they would have giant murder sex parties on their boats and on their planets where they would just like fuck each other. Yeah, well, yes. So they'd be fucking and murdering while the fucking is happening, and just complete hedonistic behavior, and awful shit. And they are naturally, all of them, very psychic. All Eldar are very, very, very psychic. So, with all of their desire for excess and all of their crazy hedonistic behavior, they accidentally birthed a god. Slaanesh didn't exist until this moment, at some point, where the Eldar went, it's time for sex murder, and Slaanesh said, oh, I think I'll exist now. When Slaanesh came into being, she immediately ate half the souls of the Eldari. Immediately. Like, just sucked up that soul spaghetti to create her, to use as fuel for her creation. At that point in time, all Eldar were marked for Slaanesh. If they die, she gets to eat their soul. That's just how it works. If you're an Eldar and you die, your soul goes to Slaanesh, and there's nothing you could do about it. If technically, if you ask the other three, they say Slaanesh wasn't what. Yeah. So, Chaos Gods are weird. When Slaanesh was birthed into existence, Slaanesh suddenly existed for all time. That was part of the cataclysm of what happened. So Slaanesh didn't exist, then existed, but once Slaanesh existed, Slaanesh had always existed. And so her existence rippled backwards through time and now exists as if she had always been there. Weird, right? Anyway, the point is, fun fact, when Slaanesh was born, Khorne was so angry about it, he picked up Cain, the other god, the elven god of war, and hit Slaanesh with Cain like a weapon. Like, he used Cain as a weapon to hit Slaanesh. Slaanesh was obviously more powerful than Cain, and so Cain shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, and Cain no longer exists, and now all his pieces are used to fuel avatars of Cain, which are a whole elf thing. Yeah. Anyway. So to explain one more thing for the elves, you'll notice all of them have these little crystals on them. There's like a crystal on that helmet, there's a crystal on that helmet, there's a crystal on this belt. Those are called soul stones. They all wear them because what they do is when the Eldari die, instead of their soul getting sucked up by Slaanesh like spaghetti, it goes into the crystal. And this saves them from being eaten by Slaanesh, but now they're in a crystal. There are some Eldari, if you look them up, there's some models that are actually, they have a bunch of crystals on their belt, and that's not because they believe they have multiple souls they need to catch. They're holding the souls of other Eldari until they can, like, do something about it. They're just holding on to them. They often have, like, big archives where they put all the souls into a machine, like a ship, and that machine you can then access it and talk to your ancestors, essentially. Wraith Knight, yep. You can put them in a Wraith Knight. In the craft world, which we'll get to. Yeah, I know, Wraith Knights. Yeah, you put them in soul engines. You can basically, you can use them for anything. Yeah. So Eldar have the ability to use their soul crystals including they put them in giant robots. Usually they just store them in a basically giant soul archive on their craft worlds. Craft worlds are basically planets, or ships the size of planets. They are homemade planets, essentially, that the Eldar made that they fly around on. Sometimes they are just ships, but most of the time they are actually homemade planets. Alright, I need to see that model now. Someone show me a pizza dreadnought. Anyway, so yeah, craft worlds. They have the whole thing going on. They store their crystals. They hide from Slaanesh. And they got decimated. So they're no longer the rulers of the galaxy, but they are still very strong. If they could regain their number somehow and remove the Slaanesh problem, they would be okay. And they'd probably take over the galaxy again. Currently, they have both those problems, so they're not gonna probably anytime soon. They're just an annoyance at this point. Sorry, Eldar players. Anyway, now, when Slaanesh came into existence, Eldar split into two distinct groups, essentially. The Eldar and the Dark Eldar. Now, you can swap between them. You are not, like, once you are a Dark Eldar or whatever, you're not like, oh, you can never come back to the Eldar. Basically, Eldar have paths in life where they say, hey, you were born, and we looked into your future, you should be a sword master. And you're destined to be a sword master or whatever. And most Eldar say, yeah, okay, that's cool. The Dark Eldar heard that shit and went, fuck that, I'll do my own thing. I'm gonna become a pirate. And that's basically what they are. The Drukhari are basically just shitty Eldar. What they found the best way to save their souls was not through soul stones, but in fact, by basically leaning into Slaanesh things, like Slaanesh stuff with of excess, without worshipping her, so they say, lean into the Slaanesh excess, and because that prolongs their life. Essentially, they, in a way, sort of appease her to not die without worshiping her. They hate her. They hate the fact that they have to do this, but they're still doing it. They're still like, you know what? They're look, if we're fucked, so is everyone else. That's the vibe they give off, you know? Like I'm taking everyone with me at this point. They don't care anymore. They have some of the coolest looking fucking vehicles. Look at that fucking bike. Reavers are so fucking cool. I love the Reaver model so goddamn much. Anyway, they're pretty crazy. Carry comic roll just for the ships so I can make pirate orcs. Yeah, I actually thought about that at one point too, making put orcs on the ships. They're just really cool vehicles. They got really cool stuff. They are essentially drow, space drow, big dark elf vibes. They really like slavery, really like torture. They have homunculi, which are weirdly not the creatures they make. These are the people. So for a long time, I thought homunculi were the name of the weird creatures they make. No, these are the name of the people that make the weird creatures. So kind of confusing a little bit. Let's do doc on it. You don't. Yeah, exactly. They have witches. They've got fucking... Yeah, there's a lot of weird shit going on. I don't even know how to describe witches. There's a guy, a friend of mine, who might even be in chat right now. He's my artist. He's the guy who made all the Ruby stuff. Like, he made my costume for this. There he is. There he is, right there. He is the Dark Eldar King. He knows everything. Have a good night, Des. He knows everything about Drukhari. If you ask him anything, he knows it. He will give you an hour-long lecture on Drukhari. If you ask him like if you ask him for a 5-cent question, he'll give you a $100 answer, and it's fucking excellent. It is. Now, I wish I was good at paying attention and remembering things, because he's told me so many things about Drukhari, and every time I go to tell someone else about them, they all fly right out of my brain. But they're excellent. There's a lot of cool stuff. So this is important. There's a lot of infighting, but it's very much like not like orc kind of infighting. It's more like this. Everyone dies in the boardroom. Like where a guy walks into a meeting and he's like, I've called you all here to talk about your betrayal. And everyone looks around at each other like, what? How does he know? You know? And then the guy at the front of the desk puts on a gas mask and everyone just starts dying of gas poisoning. He's pumping into the room and he doesn't let anyone leave. Like that's the fucking Drukhari trope. That's how they fucking work. Just straight up murder, but like dignified murder amongst each other. And then they go and torture, rape everyone else. Have you ever seen Firefly? Drukhari are very much like Reavers. there's a line from the Rebirth where it's like, they're going to kill us, rape us, eat our bodies or something like that, and if we're very, very lucky, they'll do it in that order. You know, like it's something like that. It's very much what these dudes are all about. They're a bit fucked. But yeah. So my artist for my VTuber stuff really, really loves Drakari, and he's very excellent to talk to about it at any point. Same as Eldar, but sharper. Yeah. Armor piercing. Oh, I hope this isn't monetized. What? This? No. Not at all. You know how tempted I was to press the ad button as soon as I said that? And there's a button I can press that just makes you guys watch a 60-second ad. It's very tempting to be like, not at all, and then just start an ad. I didn't want to put the ad in because that's 60 seconds I'd have to wait, but anyway, yeah, it's quick note, they're no longer psychic. After many generations, psychic shit is banned and come. Whoa. See, that's the kind of shit. That's the kind of shit that I'm talking about. He just pops in with a cool fact. You're like, fuck, I didn't know that. Anyway, yeah. They have also, I didn't talk about it, they have this cool city inside a webway. It's like a pirate city, like Tortuga, but it's called Comarag. I don't know how to say it. Comorragh. Comarag. It's like a cool pirate city, and not only Dark Eldar are there, there's some Eldar there too, but it's in the webway, so it's in the space condom. Comarag. ¿Cómo estás? Yeah, I'm sure that's what it's called. Comarag, like, wait, like Gamora, Comora. Oh, haha, that's excellent. Thank you. I never caught that before. Wow, chat was slow. Gamora, Comora. I see. That's exactly how I name stuff in D&D, so I gotta cut him slack. I mean, look, Ferrus Manus, which is Latin for Iron Hands, is the Primarch of the Iron Hands. His ship is called the Iron Hand. Like, they're always on the nose with shit, you know? It's just, it's what it is. Astarte is a goddess of war, you know? Anyway, armor piercing. They got a lot of guns that make pierce armor. They have a lot of AP, and it sucks. I hate them. I love them, but I hate them. Excuse me. Makes it easy for simple-minded people like me. I understand that statement with all of my being. Anyway, we're gonna move on for now. Dark Eldar are cool. Necrons. Remember how I said everything's from Warhammer Fantasy? Space skeletons. So in Warhammer Fantasy, there is a thing called Tomb Kings, which are basically mummies, skeletons, and they went, how do we make this in space? How do we make this space? And they went, I know, what if Terminator? And so the original Necrons, when they first came out in lore, were basically just Terminator. They were mindless machines. No, well, not mindless, but like they were Skynet. They were just machines, and they were trying to kill all the correction space robot skeletons. Fair point. They were trying to kill all the machine, kill all life and stuff. That was the original lore for the Necrons. That has changed. They have retconned or explained better what the Necrons were. And we're gonna get into that. Necrons have a lot of history that include it's intertwined with the Eldar. One side note that's not on this PowerPoint, I just watched the first episode of Pariah Nexus. Necrons are heavy. I never thought about it before. Like, I never thought about, like, oh, Necrons must be really heavy. But they're, like, bigger than humans. They're made entirely out of, like, a special metal. For some reason, I always imagined they were light because of how small and thin they are compared to other models. But, like, they're fucking heavy. Listening to them walk around, it's like you can hear just how fucking heavy these things are. Illuminator Cesarus, with his big fucking spike legs, is so goddamn heavy. Like, it's honestly annoying how loud his feet are when he's talking because of how heavy his metal is. It's really cool. I never thought about it, and that's just something to mention. That they're just, like, if a Necron fell on you, it'd probably crush all your bones. Like, they're several tons, I'm assuming, based on what they sounded like when they walked around. Anyway, moving on. Necrontyr. So they're originally a race of beings called the Necrontyr. The Necrontyr were the other side of the war in heaven, essentially. They were the ones that were fighting on the side of the Catan. The Catan were, you know, the crazy space gods, and the Necrontyr fought on their side because the Necrontyr were promised by the Catan that they were the good guys. They said, we pinky promise, we are the good guys, and the old ones are suck. we don't like them. And I think the old ones also did something to piss off the Necrontyr, so they joined the battle with the Catan. Essentially, the old ones done fucked up. We don't know what the old ones look like, by the way, or anything about them. We think they might be frog people based on the old ones in fantasy lore, but we don't know for sure. So the old ones basically went to war with the Catan, and by virtue, the Necrontyr. However, the Necrontyr had a very tough time in the war, because the Necrontyr were very short-lived. They were from a planet that was basically cancer the planet, radiation the planet. If you were on it, you were going to die at about 20 years old. Like 15 or like 10 is like middle-aged for a Necrontyr. Like, they didn't live very long, and they barely had any time to do anything. And they were like just riddled with all sorts of cancers and horrible things. Until the Necrontyr said, hey, we can make you immortal. Like, we can, if you join us, we will make you immortal, and like, you'll be able to live forever. Imagine the things you could do with the ability to live forever. Look how much you've done with your short lifespans now, your Mayfly lifespans. Let's make it so that you can have as much time as you need. And so they gave them the thing of transference, which was technically invented by Luminar Cesarus with the help of the Necrontyr. So technically they did it to themselves, but still, transference was the thing that put all their brains into robot skeletons. However, and they're skeletons because the Necrontyr had a really big death culture, a mortuary cult culture, because of how quickly they died. They were very into death. It was very much part of their religion, part of their existence, and so they chose skeletons as their form because that's how they saw themselves. Anyway, they're also some of the first bipedal creatures in the galaxy that we know of. So a lot of like demons are shaped after Necrontyr because like they're the first bipedal. Anyway, the point is, Necrontyr skeletons became the Necrons. So now they're the Necrons and no longer the Necrontyr. They have like Egyptian dynasties, so there's like the Thoth dynasty or the fuck, I can't remember the others, but each chapter is like a dynasty, and they're very Egyptian themed. They got a lot of cool Egyptian shit. When they were brought into the War of Heaven, though, they were basically, they won because of how unkillable they were and how good the technology was and stuff. Necrons in general will often focus on individuals in lore and stuff instead of groups, simply because the lower down you get on a Necron hierarchy, so like the basic warriors have no thought process, nothing up here. It's all empty. There's nothing in this brain here. It's all just, there's nothing. It's they're basically just mindless drones. As you go higher up in the hierarchy, you start to regain some of your old self, your Necrontyr self, some of your brain. The only creature that has fully kept all of their own thoughts and sentience is their Silent King. Basically, the King of the Necrons. His name I forgot. It's not Cesarus. Sekharach? Something like that? I don't remember his name. Anyway, the Silent King is the leader of the Necrons, and he's the only one that's kept all of his brain function completely intact. Everyone else has lost something of themselves in this process. But how low you are on the dynasty hierarchy changes how much of yourself you have lost. When they won the war, the Necrontyr decided, fuck the Catan. We didn't want this. We didn't want to be robot skeletons. We didn't want to lose the ability to feel the wind in our cancer-ridden skin and in our lack of hair. Please, give us back our skin. And the Necrontyr, and the Catan said, no, you're Necrons now. This is what you get. And so they turned around and they killed the Catan, basically. But since you couldn't kill the Catan, they're too powerful for that, they broke them into pieces, shattered them into a million bits, and used the bits of the Catan as batteries. So this thing back here, this glowing green light, this is an obelisk. Inside this obelisk is most often a tiny shard of a Catan that is powering the whole thing. So yeah, they shattered their gods and used them as batteries. The Silent King, after dealing with the Catan and looking at what had become of his people, he couldn't find a solution. He looked around for a long time. He couldn't find a solution. So he said, you know what? It's time for the big sleep. So he told all his Necron buddies, told all of his followers to go underground and to go into sleep mode. And they would wait 6 million years or something like that. I think it's 6 million. They would wait 6 million years until they were ready to go. And And then he hopped in his ship, hopped in a fleet of ships, and started to fly outside of the galaxy. And we'll talk about what he hit. He got about... Local Necron gets exhausted during surge, takes nap. Yeah. So they all went to sleep for 6 million years. And the Silent King spent 3 million years going between galaxies. In the gulf between galaxies, the Silent King ran into something that was so scary that he turned immediately around and came back to our galaxy and spent the last 3 million years traveling back to us. In that time, the Necrons awoke. Or have started to awaken. And as they've awoken, they've realized there's a bunch of fucking humans on our planet. And, yeah. So they're just waking up and being like, get off our planet, fuckos. This is ours. And just killing any humans that have, like, that have shown up on that planet in the meantime. Necrons, though, deal with time very strangely. They have, like, even a whole group of magic users, psychic people, called chronomancers, that have the ability to, like, fuck with time in weird ways. There's a really big one named Orkan the Diviner, and he can literally reset time and redo stuff. There's actually a really fascinating book called The Infinite and the Divine, which I think comes up in this PowerPoint in a second. But it's a book from the point of view of two Necron leaders who are basically fighting each other constantly. It's like two old men constantly giving each other shit for millions of years. And the book actually does take place over the course of millions of years because to the Necrons, time has no real meaning. And so one of those old men that are giving someone shit is the diviner. And there's a whole point where they're like in a courtroom and he keeps resetting time when the courtroom starts not going in his favor, when like the judge starts going the way he doesn't like, and he resets time, you know, and changes it so it goes in his favor. And he does that over and over until it actually goes the way he wants. That's the kind of shit they do. But what I mean by time is no real meaning is there's a part in that book also where there are a bunch of Necrons sitting around a table and they're talking to each other. They're just like, oh, what do you think about this? Well, what do you want to do about this? And there's a pause. There's a moment where they just sit and they think for a second before anyone speaks. You know, when that happens in a conversation, like there's a group of folks, they're talking, and then suddenly they just stop and they're like, all right, everyone's thinking about stuff. And that pause was 3 years long. They spent 3 years just paused, looking at each other, like, yep, what can we do? And to them, it meant nothing. Like, they just hang around. They just go meditate for 200 years, you know? Like, they don't care. They don't have any time limit on anything. Which is why the book, The Infinite and the Divine, takes place over millions of years. Longest staring contest ever. Yeah. And they don't even notice. It's just 3 years pass and they keep going. And it's fascinating. Oh yeah, The Infinite and the Divine. That's the book. All right. The next part of the PowerPoint hurts my voice, and I've been talking for like 2 hours now. This PowerPoint's gone way longer than I thought. So I'm not going to do the voice because it kills my throat. But imagine, if you will, I'm doing this in a very gravelly orc voice, okay? Thank you. Just imagine for me, because, ow, I can feel my throat dying already. Orcs. Orcs is the best. Because the orcs is green. And Gork and Mork are green. Simple as. Orcs is made for fighting. Orcs. Ilmies is too squishy for a good scrap. Lots of boys. Red is faster. Wah! There you go. That's all you need to know. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so orcs. We're gonna actually talk about this. Orcs are the third race from the War in Heaven. They are they were created as a thing called a Krork. This is a fan-made diagram of a Krork slowly devolving into an orc. But originally they started as a thing called a Krork, which was a big, scary thing. Orpo is for sneaky kids. Yeah. So they're basically the foot sloggers, the troops for the War in Heaven. Yeah. And they started, like I said, as Krorks. They were grunts for the Eldar, essentially. The Eldar were the commanders, as I was talking about before. And they are a fungus-based creature. While they have organs and blood and stuff, and it's often a matter of debate whether orcs bleed green or if they bleed red. In some games, like Space Marine, they bleed red, but in a lot of books and comics and stuff, they bleed either black or green. So Space Marine kind of got that one wrong a little bit, but we would give it a pass because it's a very fun game. So yeah, orcs, they're green, they're fungus. One of the fun things about orcs is the more combat a single individual orc sees, the bigger they get. So you can tell how much combat an orc has lived through based on how big they are. What's very interesting about that, on top of it, is that orc society, orc structure is based on the stronger you are, the more likely you are to become a leader, basically. Might is right. And so an orc that has seen a lot of combat will get big, and the orc that gets big will get better at fighting and will become stronger. And the biggest orcs are generally the leaders because they're the strongest. It's very easy to pick them out. And orcs can get very, very large. Grazgul Thaka is so big. So big. It's just like basically the current orc leader, quote unquote. They don't really have a leader, but it's as close as you get. Orcs have other cool stuff, like they have built-in genetic knowledge. So when you're born as an orc, when you are birthed into existence from your spore pod, you know exactly everything you need. You know how to make guns. You know, if you're a mech boy, you know how to make spaceships. If you're a pain boy, you know orc physiology. You know how to heal them. If you're a grunt, you know it. You just know genetically when you wake up all the knowledge you need to do stuff. So there's this thing with orcs. There's a really big meme. If you've talked to anybody who knows anything about Warhammer, they know blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, and they know if you're a weird boy, you're a psyker. Exactly. It's exactly how it is. But you know these things. You already know how it works. You don't have to be taught. It's just innate genetic knowledge. So, speaking of that, here's the meme thing. Orcs have latent psychic powers. Every single orc is just a little bit psychic. And because they're a little bit psychic, they're also a little bit, and not because, they are also a little bit dumb. So this is why this doesn't happen for the Eldar, and why it doesn't happen for humans, because humans and Eldar are both psychic. Eldar are very, very psychic. Humans are all a little bit psychic as well. But orcs are also just a little bit psychic, just like humans. But they are very dumb, and so they have this thing where they have very strong beliefs. And this does work for humans a little bit, like the Emperor, like believing your gun needs to be prayed to. This is sort of the same thing, but it's just a different variation on it. Orcs have weird beliefs about things, and because they all believe the same thing, and they're all a little bit psychic, that gets put onto reality a little bit. Now, there's memes about if you point at an orc and say bang, and it believes you have a gun that's full of ammo, it'll fall down. It's not that much. That's overblown a little bit. They're not that psychic, and it's not that powerful. You can't say, oh, the floor is lava, and now the orcs believe they're melting and they'll melt on the floor. It doesn't work that way. It basically is okay, for example, they believe if you paint a vehicle red, that vehicle will go faster. If you paint anything red, it will go faster. So if you paint a bullet red, the bullet will shoot faster. That's the thing that they believe. And that's true. Because they believe it, it becomes true. But it's not demonstrably true. It's not perfect. You look at it and go, I think this vehicle is actually 0.1% faster than it was, or 0.5% faster. It does go faster, but not always in a way that's obvious. The biggest, most obvious part of orc psychic belief that works is actually a great example in this picture here. See how this guy has a line of bullets out this gun, and then a second magazine just jammed to the ejection slot? This gun will work, despite the fact that it shouldn't work, because he and all the other orcs around him believe it will work. That's the biggest piece of orc psychicness, is that their technology, honestly, if anyone tried to operate the technology that's not an orc, it doesn't work, because it just doesn't. Their guns shouldn't fire, their vehicles shouldn't fly, their ships really shouldn't have atmosphere in them, things like that. It just doesn't, they're fine with it, and it functions. And that's the biggest that's the biggest example of their psychic stuff, is things like this happening. But for the most part, it's not as big and overblown as the memes say. But yeah, they do have that advantage where they can just sort of make stuff, and it doesn't have to be actually functional. So, some of the things they believe, just as a side little fun thing, they believe red is faster, and so red goes a little faster. They believe purple orcs are sneaky. That one was a meme that became reality, because it was a whole joke of purple orcs are sneaky because you never see a purple orc because no one had painted their orcs purple. Cool. I'll check it out in a little bit. Purple orcs are sneaky. Oh, actually, I'm just looking at it now. Thank you for the pizza dreadnought. I appreciate you. I'll show that in a second. I'll just put that on the screen in a moment at the end of the thing. So purple is sneaky because you never see a purple orc. Blue is lucky. That's why this guy's painted himself blue. He's a Death Skull, my favorite orcs. Blue is lucky, and the biggest thing about orcs is that they are the second biggest threat to the galaxy. If the orcs were to ever organize truly, they would take over. Because, like I was talking about earlier, how they are fungus-based. That means that they produce spores. So when orcs produce spores, they produce them when they die, they produce them when they fight, they produce them when they're excited. They just are constantly dropping spores. And so if you kill orcs on your planet, if orcs come to your planet and you kill a bunch of orcs and you win the fight, there will be other orcs that will grow out of those spores that they dropped, and then will hide in the forest and things until their force is big enough, and then they will pop out and attack you again, like a whole nother orc army. So once orcs are on a planet, orcs are basically done. Like the orcs are, that planet is done. The orcs they own that planet. They will forever have spores on that planet. It is now an orc planet. You can deal with it by trying to fight back constantly, but it will be a problem. So orcs are really hard to get rid of. There's a whole lot of them. There's almost as many orcs as there are humans, if not more. Probably is more. And they are just very, very numerous. And and the worst part about orcs is the reason why they can't organize is because all they care about is fighting. They don't really care about who they're fighting, even if they're fighting other orcs. Like, remember I mentioned the Geller Field earlier, the thing that prevents demons from entering your ship in the warp? They will take their ships into the warp without a Geller Field, specifically so that while they're flying somewhere, demons will invade, so they'll have something to fight on the way to their fight. Like, they don't care. They just want to fight. So, like, if they had any wants to take over the galaxy, they're totally good. They're very strong. There's a lot of them. They have this belief that helps them. You know, like, they very easily could take over if they would just organize. They never will, though. So we have that going for us. They will never organize and never team up if they can help it. Yeah, it's in-flight entertainment. Anyway. Yeah, they lack organization. The Tau. The Tau. These folks are cool looking. They're mechs, among other things. They have some other auxiliaries, but they're mostly these blue people. When people say Tau, they're mostly talking about these folks, even though the Tau is actually an organization sort of like the Covenant in Halo, where like it's not just one race, it's not just the elites, it's also the grunts and the jackals and things like that. Like Tau and Covenant are very, very similar. The Tau have kind of mysterious origins. They had like really fast tech buildup. I can kind of explain the mysterious origins real quick. So there's a Tau caste system, the fire caste, the air caste, the water caste, and the earth caste. They have different jobs. So like fire castes are all warriors. Air castes are all very like, they have like hollow bones and are very good in like air and like ships. They can't really land on planets because like they'll crumple under the weight of the gravity. You got water castes who are like diplomats, and earth castes who are like builders and things. And those castes are all based off of different tribes. So the Tau used to be separate tribes on a planet, the Tau homeworld, and those tribes were constantly at war with each other all the time, until one day a mysterious fifth tribe showed up out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, called the Ethereal tribe, or the Ethereal caste. And they just looked at the other Tau and said, "You will join us now. We will work together." And all the Tau, for no fucking reason, despite being warring factions for their entire existence, said, "Yeah, all right." How? Why? So the prevailing theory is mind control, like pheromone-based mind control or something, and that the Tau Ethereal caste were actually created by another race somewhere, or even created by Chaos itself or something. No one's quite sure why or how it happened. But they believe that the Ethereal caste were created, potentially some old ones still floating around, in order to help organize the Tau into a thing. And they also literally built better technology than humanity. They're basically in the same age of tech as humanity was in the age of technology. and they did it in like 1,000 years or something. Like, it was ridiculously fast. It was stupid fast. No one should have technology going that fast, and they did it. Literally, there was a human people that showed up, and they checked out the planet and went, oh, it's just a bunch of cavemen. All right, we're going to leave them alone. There's no point. We don't even want this planet anyway. And they flew away. And then they came back like 1,000, 10,000 years later and went, what the fuck is this? And it was all like railguns and mechs and shit. Like, it should not have happened that fast. Anyway. Blue skin. They got blue skin, no nose, and hooves. No nose, yeah. They believe in what's called the greater good, which is essentially... It's a very vague concept, something that the Imperials talked about. It's very communist in a weird way. They're like, oh, everyone's working towards the greater good. Don't worry about yourself. Communist or that's not the right word. Not individualistic, the opposite. What's the opposite of individualistic? Collectivism. It's very collectivism ideals. They believe that, you know, whatever they're doing is for the greater good. And they're a multi-species group. So, yeah, thank you. They're a multi-species group. So they have... It's not just these folks. There's also the Kroot, which are like a more warrior species. They have human auxiliaries inside the Tau. They have a bunch of species they don't really talk about. They've got weird psychic blobs like Hanar. They've got a lot. There's a lot of stuff in the Tau that they don't get talked a lot about. I wish the Tau had more... I wish more of their models were like not just the you know, the actual Tau race, and more of their auxiliaries. Because I think it'd be cool to have more options like that. Because that's the other thing. I was talking to friends. They were talking about how, like, oh, the Tau should be able to ally with the Votan because they're using the same weapons and things, and they're already clearly allies, or like at least friendly. And I think that's a good point. And then I remembered after the conversation, the Tau have all these auxiliaries that are like could fill all this space that those allies could fill if they would just put them on the tabletop. But whatever. Anyway, they're often memed on as the Weeb faction because they have like mechs and katanas and things. And yeah, it's pretty true. They're very Weeb like, but they're cool in that way. I don't know if you like mechs and things. I think they're cool. I really like the battle suits. I painted a couple of them because I just think they're cool. And there is a whole lot of samurai imagery. Like, even if you look at this picture right here, like, oh, it's just a guy with a gun. And then you look at his belt, he's got a little like tanto knife or whatever, like a little tiny like katana. Like, it's there. Same with those weird humans who pretended to be orcs. I don't know what you're talking about. That's kind of wild. I didn't know that was a thing. Anyway, if you can figure it out, let me know. So they're probably tied as the most advanced technologically. They were on top. They're probably tied with the Votan now, probably because the Votan used it. Because the Votan used their technology, so like the Votan are pretty advanced as well. But they also do use Tau guns, like old Tau guns, traded for them. Yeah, we're the top until the Votan. Now they're kind of tied. Speaking of Votan, these guys are brand new. Sort of. They're like a year old or 2 years old at this point. But they are essentially space dwarves. They are humans. They were humans, I believe, at least, that were super abhuman to the point of now they count as... I know squats are old. Hold on. They were humans that basically became abhumans to the point of not being counted as humans anymore. They are Xenos according to the Imperium. And yes, squats are old, but squats are not Votan. No, I know. Squats are not Votan. Squats are still in the Imperium. Squats and Ratlings and Ogryn are all part of the same abhuman group. Squats exist, Votan exist, but they exist separately. I didn't find this out till recently, but Votan are not squats. They are just very similar, and some Votan have been confused for squats, but squats are abhumans and Votan are Votan. It's fucking weird and hard to describe. Yeah, they're not technically squats. Squats are their own thing. Anyway, dwarves. They're space dwarves. And everything you'd expect out of space dwarves. They got grudges. They got a list of grudges. They don't like you. One of the many mysteries of Warhammer, yeah. And they are very much late-stage capitalism a faction. They might be. We're not 100% sure on that. On the further mutated squats. As far as as far as the Votan believe, the Votan do not believe they are squats. So take that for what you will. They adamantly refuse to believe that they are squats, and squats are like, yeah, that ain't us. But, you know, look at them. Anyway, they are hyper late-stage capitalism. And they're very the top knot's very popular. Okay. Stone Knife. This leans back into my thing earlier about the Imperium being based in the Himalayas. The Himalayas are vaguely close to Mongolia. The White Scars are based off of Mongolian, cavalry. So the White Scars have Mongolian haircuts, and the Sisters of Silence have a similar haircut because they're in a similar region of the world, being led by an emperor who's from that same region. So, yeah, that's why. It's not for no reason. Anyway, what I mean by late-stage capitalism is that everything can be bought and sold for the Votan. They don't care how or why. This is a mining planet. And what that I mean is this is a planet and they're about to destroy it for all its resources, whether there's people on it or not. They don't give a shit. This is a giant planet mulcher. This is a giant planet mulcher. And this planet goes in and gets eaten for resources, whether there's creatures on it or not, and then they sell those resources on to other things. They are actually totally fine with AI, and they treat AI as just a regular person. So this is a full-on AI robot that is treated just as well as this this Votan here. They both have the same rights and the same ability to do whatever. They can both buy property, the whole thing. They are equals according to the law. The AI are friends, not tools, which is how they've been managed to deal with the AI and not rising up, because there's no thing to rise up for. They are just the same as everyone else. Yeah, integrated into part of their society. And weirdly, despite this, though they pretend it's not this for this sake, they are actually sort of tolerated by the Imperium. They kind of trade with the Imperium and they deal with the Imperium. Sometimes they help each other out, because they're still sort of seen as maybe they're squats, maybe they're abhumans, but for the most part, they are treated as Xenos, but they are tolerated. They could totally be on the Imperium side in a fight and no one would bat an eye, but technically, if the Imperium is going to kill all Xenos, eventually they will come to odds, because they still do believe that they are Xenos. And there's no way they're bowing to the Imperium, essentially. Yeah, and the Imperium is becoming slightly less anti-Xenos as the bugs encroach. What are the bugs, you ask? We'll get there. Yeah. I was talking about this earlier. They might have been humans at some point. They're not really humans anymore. Moving on. Wait. Hold on. Yeah, they're not really humans anymore. That's pretty much everything about the Votan. Grudges, dwarves, AI. Pretty neat. Pretty neat that they put them in. Anyway, moving right along. Tyranids. Y'all have been waiting for this. So I'm grouping Gene Stealers, Gene Stealer cults, in with the Tyranids. I don't want to do two separate slides. But yeah, this is the other half of the Starship Troopers time. Tyranids are, ta-da, Starship Trooper bugs, basically. They are the endless horde of bugs that are here to just kill all the humans. Oh god. They're here to consume everything. They eat they love to eat. They love to consume biomass. So this is written here. This galaxy thing. Let me explain. The very first Hive Fleet was Hive Fleet Leviathan, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And when Hive Fleet Leviathan... No, is it Leviathan? Behemoth? I didn't Behemoth. Anyway, there was a Hive Fleet, and Hive Fleet is a category, a whole section of Tyranids. The very first Hive Fleet that entered our galaxy came from the galactic east, I believe. And we don't know what other galaxy they came from, except that they came from outside the galaxy. In fact, that scary thing that the Silent King of the Necrons ran into halfway across the galactic gulf was the Tyranids. And when he saw them and saw how they ate all the biomass, he realized, fuck, if they eat all the biomass in my galaxy, there won't be any left to turn back into. I need to go back and stop them. So he turned around because of the Tyranids. Tyranids like the bullfrogs. Yeah. So Tyranids are here to consume the galaxy, and they came from the galactic east. Then The next Hive fleet came, and they came from the galactic north. And then the next Hive fleet came, and they came from the galactic south. Are you seeing a pattern? And then the last one, most recent one, came, and it came from the galactic west, like the big Hive fleets. Which gives the impression that our entire galaxy is surrounded, which either means they're trying to flank us specifically, or they've eaten everything else, and we're the last one. Like, that we're the only galaxy left, is my interpretation of that, of them coming from every direction, because it just means that we're the last galaxy that haven't been consumed by the Tyranids yet. Yeah. Tyranids are basically the only thing that other species that usually will kill each other on sight will fight together on. For example, the Salamander Space Marine chapter and the, yeah, I saw it with the Illithids. That's really complicated. It's the same thing. But, so the Salamander Space Marine chapter very specifically hate Dark Eldar. It's their absolute most hated enemy. I did a game once with my friends where I played Tyranids, a 2,000 point game, where I played 2,000 points of Tyranids, and they played 1,000 points of Salamanders and 1,000 points of Dark Eldar. And it made sense for the grand scheme of things, because Tyranids are the great team maker. Even if your most hated enemy is on the field with you and you're in the middle of a battle and Tyranids show up, you're dropping everything to work together to kill the Tyranids, because they are so much of a problem. They are very strong, very, very good at what they do, and they are a near endless horde of just death. When I said orcs are the second largest threat to the galaxy, this is the largest threat to the entire galaxy, is the Tyranids, and it's just getting worse as time goes on. The Tyranids are an absolute menace and the biggest problem any of us are facing. Even like Chaos is starting to have problems with Tyranids. So yeah, Tyranids are an issue, and they're mysterious because no one knows quite like where exactly they came from, other than outside the galaxy. They have a thing that controls them called the Hive Mind, which some people believe is an actual creature outside of our galaxy, but I believe is just the Gestalt consciousness of all the Tyranids put together. So if you were to kill every single Tyranid, the Hive Mind would die because there'd be nowhere for it to be. So that's really what I think it is the consciousness of the Hive Mind. Now, there is some evidence to suggest that it actually is a being of specific, like a specific being, but we'll get to that. Yeah, no one knows where they came from or why, other than to eat. It might have just been a highly evolved organism. They have a lot of numbers. They seem to have a plan all the time. It's just fascinating. Yeah, Hive Mind. Yeah, so they seem to have a plan, and it's kind of crazy. So the Hive Mind has the ability to control the Tyranids, to tell them what to do, but it has its limits. So it's a psychic entity, and when the Hive Mind basically looks on an area, the warp darkens. It's called a shadow in the warp, and it means that the Hive Mind is looking towards your area of space. And it means you can't speak, you can't use psychic energy to contact anyone. There's no way demons can manifest. Like, it shuts everything down, really. Not no way demons can manifest. It's very difficult for demons to exist in the shadow of the warp. And basically the weight of the consciousness that is the Tyranid Hive Mind looking in that space will shut everything down. So yeah. It's strong and scary, and Hive Mind's spooky. Last but not least, of the Tyranids, there's a group called the Gene Stealers. To put them into perspective, or to put them into context, if a Hive Mind decides it's going to attack a planet, it will often, maybe sometimes decades, if not hundreds of years beforehand, send a single one of these, called a Gene Stealer, to the planet. The Gene Stealer will go underground and will start kidnapping people. And when it kidnaps them, it will impregnate them with its gene seed, which will then produce horrible creatures that look like this, like horrible mutation creatures. Those creatures will be loyal to the Hive Mind, but also part human. Then they will take those part human, loyal Hive Mind creatures and breed them again. And they'll do that one more time, or they'll breed them again, and then you get these third generation, which look almost human. They have like ridges on their head, and they're bald, but they're pretty close to human, and humanity's so varied that no one's going to notice a bald person. They're not going to be like, what? You must be an alien if you're bald. Like, they're really good at hiding at that point. If these people have babies, they create those again. They create more Gene Stealers. So it's a circle, it's a cycle. So first generation, And there's a second generation, which is a little bit better. This is third gen. Fourth gen comes back to a circle to regular gene stealers. And they're seen as like holy children because they're called gene stealer cults because they basically turn their connection to the hive mind into... They also know wigs exist, exactly. And the connection to the hive mind into a like religion, and really their connection to the hive mind is entirely connected to their patriarch, which is the first gene stealer. And the first gene stealer gets... okay, it's kind of weird. The first gene stealer loses its connection to the hive mind, completely cut off, and it becomes a sentient, self-serving entity. Its entire job at this point is to take over this planet, and it's no longer connected. And it will do that and become this horrible, bloated, creepy, like, father of all these cultists, and they'll be connected to the leader through a small hive mind. When the hive mind comes eventually to the planet and tries to start fighting, these groups, the gene stealers, will rise up at the same time, or sometimes beforehand, but usually at the same moment as a Tyranid invasion, so that the defenders, are basically circled by Tyranids. They're circled from the front end, they're getting attacked on the front lines, and their own workers and their own people are rising up to help the Tyranids win, essentially. And that's what they're there for. Basically, they're to protect, or they're there to ensure the hive mind's dominance. Once this is done, these folks will connect to the hive mind and throw themselves into the biomass pits and be reabsorbed and reused for the genetic material for more Tyranids. The only weird part is that the patriarchs will try and run away before the hive mind gets there. They don't always succeed, but they will try and run away to try and find a new planet to start a new gene stealer cult, because they don't want to be absorbed. Sometimes they get caught and absorbed. Usually they don't, and they run away to a new planet, hide in a storage crate or something. So yeah, sometimes too, some planets will they'll infect a gene stealer planet that's like a recruitment planet for the Astra Militarum, and then suddenly you have entire guard regiments that were recruited from that planet that are gene stealer babies, and no one knows that the entire guard regiment is actually an alien regiment. So that kind of stuff happens all the time. So yeah, gene stealer. So Tyranids are scary both on their just out in combat, but also in their weird ingenuity of like hundreds of years of patience to just wait to take a planet through waiting for the cults to rise up. And that, my friends, is everything. There's no end slide. This is the end slide. It's done. It's over. That's all the factions in 40k. That's what 40k is it's a bunch of factions and their interconnections. Good God, I need water. Holy shit, that was longer than I thought. That went way longer than last time. I got too distracted explaining too many things. Now the question is, what faction do you play? What's your favorite? Thank you for the hydrate, Snow Knife. I'll get on there right now. Oh wait, you know what? One last thing. Hold on. Close this. Minimize that. We gotta show off Stone Knife's meme that I got. There we go. You were distracting you? Impossible. I play Orcs and Black Templars. Nice. Orcs are excellent. What culture do you use? So yeah, this is what I got. Thank you. Appreciate you for the excellent meme. Good God, water, thirsty. I play Death Guard mainly, Chaos. I am starting to pick up demons though. I know you. I know Devin. I know you with your. Well, we're gonna turn this off so we can see chat better. I know you and your Emperor's Children. Okay, put my stuff away. Free Buddhas. Okay. All right. That's not bad. That's pretty good. Hell yeah. Definitely could use the other vehicles then.